Alright everyone, welcome back. I'm Christian, and as you can see from length of this video, this is our Park Ranger Horror Stories compilation. I know that most of you just love to turn my show on and chill in the background. And even though we have Spotify linked below, you guys do prefer YouTube. So this is our compilation of fictional Park Ranger horror stories we published so far. Do enjoy, and write below your thoughts. Alright everyone, welcome back. I'm Old Hillbilly, and this is one of those videos that jump-started this channel. A few years ago, Park Rangers at its finest. So, if you like deep woods, park rangers, and creepy national parks, you'll love this episode. Also, thank you for your support during these times. I'm Mike Anderson. Been a park ranger in Utah's canyonlands for over 15 years. I know these canyons like the back of my hand. The wind here feels different than anywhere else, cold and sharp, cutting through the jagged rocks. The mornings are quiet, the kind of silence that fills your ears, but also gives you space to think. Lately, though, things have felt off. It wasn't just the usual isolation, the constant vigilance. There was something else. The hairs on the back of my neck would stand up as I made my rounds, and it wasn't just the wind. It was the feeling that something was watching me, waiting. That's the thing with this job. You get used to the stillness, but you never get used to the quiet that feels too still. The calls started a few weeks ago. Campers reported strange noises. Howling, scratching, things that didn't belong out here. Nothing new, nothing I couldn't brush off. People get scared when they're out here alone. They let their imagination run wild. But then came the bodies. 4 campers found just off a trail. Mutilated, disfigured, and there were symbols carved into their skin. Crude, unnatural markings that no one could make sense of. The locals, they whispered about skinwalkers. Some cursed creature from Navajo legend, able to take the form of any animal. But we all know what happens when you let superstition control a case. The FBI's involved now. They say it's a cult, maybe some kind of ritualistic killing. It's easy for them to say that, but out here in the silence of the desert, it feels too close to something darker, something primal. I didn't know it at the time, but this would be the beginning of something I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't just another case of wild animals or crazed hikers. It was personal. The man I trusted most in this godforsaken job, the biologist I worked with, would turn out to be the last person I should have ever let into my world. His name's Mark. Quiet guy, keeps to himself mostly. But he's sharp, knows the land better than anyone. When I first saw those bodies, I called him in to help, thinking he might be able to identify the animal. Or the animal-like marks on them. He's the one who suggested it might be something unnatural. At first, I thought he was just spooked, but then something changed in him. His eyes, cold, distant. Whenever we talked about the killings, it was like he was hiding something. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I could feel it. Mark wasn't just a biologist anymore. He was something else, something darker. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mark was playing me. The more I thought about it, the more it gnawed at me. I trusted him, but something in his manner had shifted. It wasn't just the tension in his voice when we discussed the killings. It was in the way he moved, the way he watched me sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. It was almost like he was sizing me up, and I hated that I didn't know why. The FBI agent assigned to the case, Special Agent Harper, wasn't much help either. He was too clean-cut, too polished for someone in a place like this. He'd come in with his slick, high-tech gear and his scientific approach, but every time we'd walk through the desert, I could see the unease in his eyes. The FBI doesn't handle this kind of thing well. It wasn't just the murders, it was the land itself. There was something about the canyonlands that made people act differently. One evening, after a long day of searching the area for any more signs of the killer, Mark and I found ourselves at the edge of a cliff overlooking a stretch of desolate land. The sun was setting, casting an orange glow over the rocks and the dust, the kind of beauty that almost felt like it was mocking us in the face of what we were dealing with. "You ever think about what's out there?" Mark asked suddenly, his voice quieter than usual. I turned to him, trying to read his expression. "What do you mean?" "You know, the legends," he said, the corner of his mouth twitching. "The skinwalkers. They say they're always out there, watching, waiting." I felt a chill crawl up my spine, but I wasn't about to let him know that. "It's just folklore, Mark. People get scared out here, start talking nonsense." He laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. It was hollow, as if the man I knew was slipping further away. "Yeah, folklore. Maybe. But you know, the way things are now, I wonder how much of it's true." I didn't know what to say. The conversation shifted after that, but the weight of his words stuck with me. I knew he didn't believe in legends like that. Not really. But he had a way of making you question everything you thought you knew. The next morning, we found something that shook me to my core. Mark led me to a site he'd discovered, a remote part of the Canyonlands, deep enough that even the locals hadn't dared to go. At first, I thought it was just another campfire, abandoned in a hurry. But when I saw the blood, the streaks of it across the rocks, I knew we were looking at something much worse. It wasn't just blood. There were more symbols carved into the rock, this time deep and purposeful. It was as if someone had been trying to mark their territory, send a message. And then I saw it, a trail of prints leading off into the shadows. They weren't animal tracks. They weren't human either. They were something else. Something I couldn't even begin to describe. "I've never seen anything like this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark didn't reply. Instead, he bent down, running his fingers along the markings on the rocks. "You're right," he said quietly, his voice almost reverent. "This isn't just a killing. This is something else." I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But as I looked down at those strange, twisted prints, I had a horrible, gut-wrenching feeling that I would soon find out. The FBI was becoming increasingly frustrated. They wanted answers, but I was getting the sense that they weren't prepared for what was really going on here. Special Agent Harper spent more time trying to steer the investigation toward human involvement. Cult activity, ritualistic murders, the kind of thing you'd expect from someone who had read too many textbooks on criminal behavior. But this wasn't like anything in those textbooks. This wasn't human nature at work. I knew that now. Mark was no help. His strange behavior was only escalating. We'd been working together for a while, but lately I was having trouble getting a read on him. When he spoke, it was as if he wasn't all there. His mind was elsewhere, lost in whatever twisted theory he'd developed. But when it came to the kills, he was always too calm, too detached. It was unsettling, like he was viewing the whole thing as just another experiment. And then there was the matter of his body. Over the last few weeks, he'd become pale, almost sickly looking. His eyes were sunken, his face gaunt. He seemed to lose weight with every passing day. I'd seen people break under stress before, but this was different. It was like he was wasting away, and it wasn't from exhaustion. It was something else, something more sinister. "Mike, look at this," he said one evening as we scoured the canyon floor, pulling me from my thoughts. He was standing next to an outcropping of rocks, crouched low, inspecting something with great focus. I walked over, trying not to show my growing unease. He pointed at the dirt, where something glinted in the fading light. I knelt beside him, my heart suddenly racing. It was a piece of flesh. Human flesh. This wasn't just some animal attack. This was something deliberate. Something, had been dragging these people out into the wilderness and tearing them apart. I felt my stomach churn as I stared at the piece of skin, its edges still raw, as if it had been recently severed. Mark stood, his face unreadable. "I think we're getting closer," he said, his voice eerily calm. He didn't even flinch. In fact, he seemed almost pleased. I stood up, shaking my head. "Closer to what, Mark?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small vial, holding it up to the dying light. Inside was a strange, dark liquid. "I've been studying the blood," he said, his tone low, almost conspiratorial. "There's something unique about it, something that doesn't belong." My blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Mark's eyes met mine, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something there. Something raw and unfiltered. "I think it's time you knew the truth, Mike. What's been happening out here? It's not just murder. It's a ritual. A ritual that's been happening for centuries." My heart skipped a beat as the weight of his words settled in. "A ritual?" I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. Mark nodded slowly. "Yes, and it's not just a cult, Mike. It's much worse. I've been part of it. And now you are too." I felt a sickening lurch in my stomach as Mark's words hung in the air. "What the hell are you talking about, Mark?" I managed to force out, but my voice was thin, strained. My mind was spinning, struggling to make sense of what he was implying. Mark didn't flinch. He didn't seem surprised by my reaction. Instead, he kept his gaze locked on mine, like he was waiting for me to understand. "You think this is about some killer on the loose? About a twisted mind doing horrible things?" He shook his head slowly. "No, Mike. This is about power. This is about survival, and I've been part of it for a long time." I stepped back, my chest tightening. You've been involved in this, all this time?" He nodded almost lazily, as if he were telling me the weather. "I've seen things out here that would make your skin crawl. There's more to this land than you realize. More to the stories people tell. People like me, we've been using those stories, those legends, to protect ourselves, to keep going, to keep living." I felt a wave of nausea hit me. The man I had trusted, the one I'd worked alongside for years, was standing in front of me, speaking like some kind of madman. And what was worse, I could feel his certainty. He wasn't delusional. He believed it. He was living it. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry. "Mark, I don't understand. What are you doing?" He looked at me like I was the one who had lost my mind. "I'm surviving, Mike. I've been surviving for years. You think I'm just some scientist out here doing field work? That's how I keep you off my trail. The whole biologist thing, it's a cover." I felt a chill creep down my spine, but I couldn't tear my eyes away from him. "What do you mean? You're not a biologist?" Mark's expression twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I'm not just studying the animals, I'm becoming them." A sharp, heavy silence settled between us. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. I was staring at the man I thought I knew, but this man wasn't the Mark I had worked beside for years. The eyes staring back at me were colder, darker, inhuman. "I'm doing what I have to do, Mike," he continued, his voice low, almost pleading. "You've seen the symbols, the tracks. You've seen the blood. This isn't just a disease. It's a choice. The transformation. It's the only way to keep from aging, to keep from dying. And all the legends, they were right. The skinwalkers, they were real. They are real, and I'm one of them." I stumbled backward, my heart racing. "You've been doing this? Killing people? Using them in these rituals?" Mark's face softened just slightly, as if he were explaining a simple concept to a child. "It's not about murder, Mike. It's a sacrifice, and it's the only way to stay alive. You wouldn't understand, but you will soon enough. You have to be part of it. It's the only way." His words felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to run, to scream, to escape from this nightmare. But I couldn't move. I was paralyzed, caught in the grip of a twisted reality that I never signed up for. And the worst part, I wasn't sure I could trust myself anymore. "You're lying," I said, barely above a whisper. "You're lying." Mark didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his pack again, pulling out something I hadn't seen before. A jagged, silver object that reflected the fading light. A knife, but not just any knife. It was old, worn, and inscribed with the same markings we had found on the bodies. "I'm not lying, Mike," he said softly, his voice oddly comforting. "I've been waiting for you to see the truth, and now you're part of it too." I wanted to say something to stop him, but all I could hear was the sound of my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't comprehend it, couldn't process the reality of what he was saying. And then, as if sensing my growing panic, Mark began to laugh softly. "It's already begun, Mike. You're already part of the ritual. You just don't know it yet." I don't remember how I got back to camp. Everything after Mark's confession is a blur. I'm not sure if it's because of the fear or the shock, or if something else was happening to me. Something I couldn't explain. My thoughts felt muddled, like I was wading through thick fog, and every step I took seemed heavier than the last. I stumbled into the tent, my mind racing. I tried to breathe, tried to focus, but nothing made sense. How could Mark be involved in this? How could I not have seen it? All those late-night conversations about legends, his cryptic remarks. They weren't just theories. They were his reality. I tried calling Agent Harper, but the signal was spotty and my phone kept cutting out. I cursed under my breath and tossed it aside. I couldn't let Mark get away with this. I couldn't let him continue. But how do you stop someone who knows the land better than you? Someone who's lived with its dark secrets for years. I didn't know what else to do, so I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to the place where we had found the body parts. It was the only place where I felt like I might find something that could prove Mark was lying, that he wasn't a skinwalker. But as I walked through the rocky terrain, a cold, familiar dread settled in the pit of my stomach. The world around me felt wrong. The air was too still, the shadows too long. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting, watching. Every crack of a twig, every whisper of wind through the trees felt like it could be him, lurking just out of sight. I found myself standing at the edge of the rocks, where we had seen the strange prints and the blood. The sun had long since disappeared, leaving the canyon in darkness. I pulled out my flashlight, shining it across the rocks. There was no sign of Mark, but I could feel his presence, his influence, pressing in from all sides. And then I heard it. A rustling behind me, something moving through the underbrush. My heart leapt in my chest, and I spun around, hand on my gun, but there was nothing there. Just the wind, stirring the dry desert plants. I couldn't stay in the open. I had to get back to camp, had to figure out a way to stop him before it was too late. But as I turned to leave, I heard it again. Closer this time, a growl. It wasn't an animal. It wasn't Mark either. This was something else, something worse. I could feel my pulse hammering in my neck, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I needed to run to get out of there, but my legs felt like they were made of stone. The growl came again, this time with a scraping sound like claws on rock. I wasn't alone anymore. And then, out of the darkness, I saw it. A figure, tall, hunched, with eyes that gleamed like twin moons in the night. The shape was almost human, but distorted, as if the very air around it was warping. My body went cold, and I couldn't move. It was like a nightmare I couldn't escape from. "Mike." The voice was soft, almost sweet, but it sent a chill through my spine. It was Mark's voice. "You should have listened." I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't. The thing in front of me stepped closer, its claws dragging along the rocks. Mark's twisted grin appeared behind the creature's figure. "It's too late now." The creature, whatever it was, moved closer, its eyes locking onto mine with an unsettling hunger. I could barely breathe, the weight of the moment pressing down on me, suffocating me. I wanted to run, but my legs were frozen, unwilling to cooperate. The sound of its claws scraping against the rock grew louder, echoing in the vast emptiness of the canyon. Mark stepped forward, his silhouette emerging from behind the beast, his face a twisted mask of satisfaction. He was calm, too calm, like this was all part of the plan. The creature's eyes flickered from Mark to me, and for a moment I thought I saw recognition in its gaze, a knowing, dark understanding. You didn't think it would be that easy, did you? Mark's voice was low, almost affectionate. You've always been so naive. I felt a pang of fury rise up in me, mixed with an icy dread. He was the one who had led me into this nightmare, the one who had betrayed me. But more than that, I realized now just how deep he had gone. This wasn't just a series of murders. This was something far more ancient, more twisted. This was Mark's legacy, his obsession, his ritual. The creature shifted, its hulking form blurring in the dark. It was like something out of a fever dream. Half human, half beast. Its features were constantly shifting, as if it didn't quite know what it was. The growl that came from its throat was low, almost sadistic. You'll join us soon enough, Mark continued, his voice tinged with a kind of twisted affection. The transformation, it's not a curse, it's a gift. Suddenly, everything clicked. The pieces of the puzzle I had been trying to put together fell into place with sickening clarity. The disappearances, the mutilated bodies, the strange symbols. It wasn't about survival. Mark hadn't been trying to protect me. He'd been trying to pull me into this, into whatever twisted thing he had become. My heart raced, but I couldn't let the fear consume me. I had to fight. I had to stop this. I reached into my pack, my hand trembling as I pulled out the silver-coated bear trap I had stashed earlier. Mark's obsession with skinwalkers had given me a crucial piece of folklore to work with. Silver. It was said to be their weakness, though I wasn't entirely sure if that was true. But I had no other options left. The creature hissed, sensing my movement, but it was too late. I flung the trap open, the silver glinting in the dim light as it snapped shut. In a blur of motion, I shoved it toward the creature's legs, praying that it was enough. The creature shrieked, a high-pitched wail that rattled my bones as the trap clamped down on its leg. Mark shouted in fury, stepping forward, but it was too late. The creature's body jerked violently, as if struggling against some unseen force, and then there was silence. For a moment, I thought I had imagined it. But then I saw it. Mark's body, writhing and contorting as it twisted into something more grotesque. His limbs lengthened, his skin stretched and pulled, and I knew then that what I had been seeing was not just a man, but a creature. An abomination of flesh and bone. His eyes flashed with fury, but the transformation wasn't complete. From behind me, I heard the roar of federal agents. Harper and the team had arrived, guns drawn. In the chaos of the moment, I didn't know what happened to the creature, whether it escaped or fell to the trap. But I didn't care. What mattered was Mark. The transformation was still underway, but he was no longer in control. He was trapped, vulnerable. The silver worked, after all. With one last push of determination, I reached for my gun and fired. The shot rang out, echoing through the canyon. Mark's twisted form crumpled to the ground, his face frozen in a grotesque grimace. Harper moved forward, her voice shaking but authoritative. We got him. I nodded numbly, my hands shaking, my legs barely holding me up. It was over. The nightmare was over. But as I looked down at the body before me, I couldn't help but feel the weight of the years lost. The trust betrayed, the lives taken, and the truth that I'd been too blind to see. This place, the Canyonlands, would never be the same for me, and neither would I. The truth had a price, and some things were better left buried. The morning sun is just beginning to crest the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow over Carigini National Park. I feel a mix of excitement and apprehension as I load my Land Cruiser for my first solo patrol. I check my gear one last time. Radio check. Map check. Water and supplies all accounted for. I climb into the driver's seat and start the engine, the sound breaking the morning stillness. This park, with its rugged terrain and untamed beauty, is now my responsibility. The Australian outback stretches out before me, vast and unyielding. I can't help but think about how far I've come to be here. With a sense of nostalgia, I reach into the glove compartment and pull out a weathered, leather-bound notebook. Flipping it open, I'm greeted by a collage of notes, sketches, and photographs. More than half of the photos feature me and my father in various outdoor settings, snapshots of our shared adventures. My parents divorced when I was just a kid, so my life was split between their two worlds. Growing up, I spent the weekdays with my mom in the stifling urban sprawl of Perth, but the weekends were my escape. My dad would come whisk me away to a different reality. We'd go exploring the national parks all across Western Australia, hiking through dense bushland and camping under starlit skies. The trips were a much-needed escape from the confines of city life and the constant tension between me and Mum's new boyfriend, Mark, a prick who could never seem to hide his disdain for me. The feeling was mutual. As I flip through the images, I see myself growing up, from a curious child in awe of the natural world to a teenager, more confident and assured, always by my dad's side. One particular photo catches my eye. It's of me at about 9 or 10 years old, around the time of the divorce. I'm standing with Dad by a serene lake, our smiles as wide as the horizon behind us. We're proudly holding up a fish we caught together. I gently turn the photo over. There, in my dad's familiar, slanted handwriting, is a message that strikes a chord in my heart. The wilderness is where you'll find yourself. The last photo in the collection, taken on the weekend of my 15th birthday, is one I rarely look at, but today I feel compelled to. We're sitting on a rocky outcrop, our faces turned towards the setting sun. Dad's arm is around my shoulders, and I'm leaning into him, a half smile on my face. But it's his expression that catches my eye. There's a shadow that hangs over him. He was a man haunted by demons that he never spoke with me about, and that I was always too afraid to ever ask. Despite the darkness that seemed to cling to him, my love for him was unwavering. His complexities, in a way, made me love him more. He was my rock, my constant in a sea of change. In my heart of hearts, I had convinced myself that it would always be the two of us, father and daughter, side by side against the world. The crackle of the radio startles me out of my reverie. The voice of my supervisor's familiar, gruff voice fills the cabin. "Arnhem, do you read me?" I pick up the radio and press the button, my voice steady, but with an undercurrent of anticipation. "This is Ranger Arnhem, reading you loud and clear. What's the good word, Big Mike?" "Just checking in to see if you're all set for your solo excursion," Big Mike replies. "Yeah, all good here. Just about to head out," I smile, appreciating his concern. "Remember, kiddo, this park's a wild place. Keep your wits about you and don't take unnecessary risks," he advises. "Absolutely. I promise I won't do anything you wouldn't," I reply with a playful tone that elicits a chuckle on the other end. "Good, that's what I like to hear. And hey, Willow," he adds, a hint of warmth breaking through his usually stoic demeanor. "Your old man would be proud of you. You've got this." A lump forms in my throat at his words. In a lot of ways, becoming a park ranger was my attempt to stay connected with my dad in the only way I knew how. "Thanks, Bian. I'll report back by late afternoon." "Arnhem out," I say, signing off. As I navigate the rugged tracks winding through the park, the sun climbs higher, casting sharp shadows across the red earth. The landscape is breathtaking, with gorges slicing through the terrain and ancient rock formations standing as silent witnesses to time. Several uneventful hours into my patrol, the landscape unfolds in a familiar rhythm: red earth, towering gorges, and the occasional wildlife. It's a typical day in Karajini, tranquil yet alive with the whispers of nature. However, as I approach the remote area near Wino Gorge, something catches my eye. It's a subtle disturbance, a flicker of movement or a shade out of place hard to discern at first, but unmistakably unusual. Wino Gorge, while known for its breathtaking views, is rarely visited, its beauty guarded by the ruggedness of its terrain. It could be anything: a lost hiker, a rare animal sighting, or perhaps just a trick of light and shadow. But as a park ranger in this unforgiving expanse, every possibility warrants attention. Curiosity piqued, I decide to take a detour to investigate. The stillness is shattered by the ominous rumble of shifting earth. My eyes dart upwards, catching sight of a massive boulder breaking free from the cliff above. Time seems to slow as I watch it tumble, gaining momentum, its path unmistakably aimed at my Land Cruiser. My heart pounds in my chest, a primal instinct to survive kicking in. Gripping the steering wheel, I swerve the vehicle with all the might I can muster. The landscape blurs as I make a desperate attempt to evade the impending collision. But the boulder, like a relentless predator, seems to follow my every move. The distance between us rapidly closes. With a final, futile twist of the wheel, I brace for impact. The world erupts into chaos. The deafening crash of metal against stone reverberates through the air. The 4x4 lurches violently, throwing me against my seatbelt as the world outside spins in a dizzying whirl of red dust and shattered glass. The airbags deploy with a force that feels like a punch to my chest and face, their rapid inflation cushioning the brutal impact. For a moment, everything is white and suffocating, the smell of propellant strong in my nostrils. My ears ring from the loud pop of the airbags and the thunderous crash of the boulder. Pain sears through my body as the vehicle comes to a jarring halt, tossed aside like a toy in the wake of the boulder's destructive path. I struggle to catch my breath, the air thick with dust and the acrid scent of burning rubber. I groan, a deep-seated pain throbbing in my head. My hand instinctively goes to my forehead, feeling the wetness of blood seeping through my fingers. Bloody hell. I mutter under my breath, the words barely audible over the ringing in my ears. I try to orient myself amidst the wreckage. The vehicle is crumpled, its frame twisted in an unnatural contortion. My head throbs and my vision swims, but the urgency of the situation propels me forward. I quickly check myself for injuries. Apart from a throbbing pain in my head and a few bruises, I seem okay. The car, however, is another story. It's totaled, a twisted mass of metal and shattered glass, with smoke billowing from the hood. I fumble for the radio, my hand shaking. "Base, this is Ranger Arnhem," I croak, hoping the radio survived the crash. Static crackles in response, a sign that communication might still be possible. "I've been in an accident near Wino Gorge. Need immediate assistance." The radio remains silent, leaving me with a sinking feeling of isolation. Panic rises in my chest. I'm tens of kilometers away from the nearest ranger station and a rarely patrolled part of the park. My water supply is limited, and with the harsh sun climbing higher, the heat becomes suffocating. The old fear, that gnawing sense of abandonment, starts creeping back, threatening to paralyze me. It's a ghost I thought I'd left behind, but here in the vastness of the outback, it looms large once more. But I fight against the rising tide of panic. I close my eyes, take a deep breath, and focus on what I can control. "You can do this, Willow," I say to myself through clenched teeth. I recall the survival training I underwent as part of my ranger induction, the countless hours of first aid, navigation, and emergency response drills. With a grimace, I try to push the car door open. It creaks and resists, a reminder of the force of the crash. As I exert more pressure, a sharp pain shoots through my arm, causing me to wince. Carefully, I assess my wrist. It's swollen and tender. I suspect it's sprained, maybe even fractured. I awkwardly maneuver out of the driver's seat, grabbing the first aid kit as I do so. Sitting on the ground, I lean against the vehicle, trying to steady my breathing. I give myself a more thorough examination, checking for other injuries I might have missed in the initial shock. The throbbing in my head is intense, and I feel a warm trickle of blood down my temple, maybe a concussion. There's a deep cut on my leg from the collision. It's bleeding, but not profusely. I clean the wounds as best as I can with the limited supplies in the kit and bandage them tightly. The pain in my wrist is persistent, but I manage to wrap it in a makeshift splint. As I sit there, gathering my thoughts, I remember passing a waterfall a few kilometers away on my patrol route. The thought of its shade and fresh water gives me a sliver of hope in this dire situation. I know I need to get there if I want to increase my chances of survival. Gathering my wits, I turn my attention to the GPS mounted on the dashboard, hoping for a glimmer of guidance. But my heart sinks as I find it damaged beyond use, its screen a spider web of cracks, lifeless and unresponsive. I turn to the glove compartment, rummaging through its contents until my fingers find the familiar, slightly worn edges of a map. Laying it flat on the hood of the damaged vehicle, I try to pinpoint my current location. Using landmarks I remember passing, like the distinctive shape of a nearby gorge and the direction I was heading, I estimate my position. It's not exact, but it should be close enough. I trace the contours and landmarks with my finger. The waterfall is marked clearly, a blue squiggle amidst a sea of browns and greens. I plot my course, mentally calculating the distance and the direction I need to head. The sun, now a fiery orb in the sky, will be my guide. I need to head east towards the rising sun, then veer slightly north. Gathering my strength, I stand up, wincing at the sharp pain in my leg and wrist. I grab my backpack and fill it with supplies from the car. Water canteens, emergency rations, a small survival kit, and most importantly, my notebook. It's not much, but it's something. I put on a pair of sunglasses and a hat to shield myself from the relentless sun. I scour the area around the wreck, searching for anything that could serve as a makeshift walking stick. After a few minutes of searching, I find a sturdy, fallen branch. It's not perfect, but it's solid enough to support my weight and help me maintain my balance. Before heading out, I leave a note for any potential rescuers, detailing the accident and my intended direction toward the waterfall. Carefully, I attach it to the windshield wipers, making sure it's secure and visible. The trek is grueling, each step a test of endurance. My sprained wrist throbs with every movement, and the cut on my leg stings sharply, but I push through the pain. The rugged terrain is unforgiving, with rocky outcrops and uneven ground making the journey more challenging. As I walk, I can't help but think of my dad. The stories he told me of his adventures in the wild, the tips he gave me for surviving in harsh conditions, they all come flooding back. I realize now how much those weekend excursions with him were not just about bonding, but also about preparing me for moments like this. Every few hundred meters, I come to a stop, taking sips from my canteen, rationing the precious water to make it last as long as possible. The sun relentlessly beat down on me, causing sweat to pour from my brow and evaporate instantly in the arid air. Each pause is also an opportunity to check the compass from my survival kit to ensure that I'm still heading in the right direction. As I trudge on, a nagging sensation begins to gnaw at the edges of my consciousness. It's a feeling of being watched, a prickling at the back of my neck that I can't quite shake off. At first, I dismiss it as the jitters, but the feeling persists. I catch fleeting glimpses of shadows moving at the edge of my vision, too quick to be just tricks of light. Every rustle of the underbrush, every snap of a twig sends a shiver down my spine. It's as if the landscape itself is watching me, a silent stalker just out of sight. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, I reach the waterfall. The sound of cascading water is a welcome relief. The shade provided by the surrounding trees offers a respite from the searing sun. I collapse near the water's edge. I crawl towards the water, the sound of it a soothing balm to my frazzled nerves. I carefully unscrew the cap of my canteen and dip it into the clear, cool water, filling it to the brim. The water is pristine, a lifeline in the unforgiving environment. I take a cautious sip, letting the liquid refresh my parched throat. The heat is relentless, and my body aches for relief. With a deep breath, I begin to strip off my dusty, sweat-soaked clothes. Each movement is a challenge with my injuries, but the thought of the cool water on my skin spurs me on. I leave my clothes in a neat pile on the rocks and step gingerly into the water. The shock of the coolness is immediate, sending shivers through my overheated body. I wade deeper, submerging myself up to my shoulders. The water soothes my aching muscles and the sting of my injuries. I immerse my head, letting the water flow over me, washing away the dust and fear that clung to me since the crash. Floating there, I close my eyes and let the water cradle me, a temporary escape from the pressing reality of my situation. But there's no time to linger. I have to be practical to think about survival. I emerge from the water and dress. I redo my bandaging, making sure they're secure. While I sit there, drying off in the sun, I start to formulate a plan. I know they'll send out a search party once I don't report back, but with the vastness of the park, it could be a while before they find me. I need to make myself as visible as possible. As the sun begins its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I find a suitable spot near the waterfall to set up a temporary camp. I clear the ground of debris and lay down a layer of leaves and branches to sit on. Gathering stones, I create a small circle for a fire, ensuring it's far enough from the trees and brush to prevent any risk of a wildfire. The process of starting a fire is arduous, especially with my injured wrist, but I persevere. Using a lighter from my survival kit, I finally manage to spark a flame. I feed the fire with small twigs and branches, watching as the flames grow stronger. As the temperature drops rapidly, I wrap myself in a thermal blanket, huddling close to the fire's comforting glow. Underneath the star-studded sky, I can't help but feel a sense of vulnerability. The vastness of the wilderness and the isolation it brings are both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Yet the fire serves as a beacon of hope, a signal to any rescue aircraft that may be scouring the park for me. As night falls, the sounds of the outback become more pronounced. The distant calls of nocturnal animals, the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the continuous murmur of the waterfall create a symphony of wilderness. I take out my notebook and a pen from my backpack and start to write. I jot down my location, the details of the accident, and my current situation. I note the direction I walked from the crash site and any landmarks I passed and cross-reference them on my map. After a while, I set aside the notebook and focus on staying warm and alert. I periodically add wood to the fire, ensuring it keeps burning throughout the night. I wrap myself in my thoughts, the crackling of the fire a soothing backdrop, when suddenly a rustling sound cuts through the silence. It's coming from the dense brush just beyond the firelight's reach. I tense up, every muscle in my body on high alert. You've no doubt seen all those memes about how Australian wildlife is out to murder you. While mostly gross exaggerations, there's always a kernel of truth in them. The outback is home to some of the most unique and, yes, potentially dangerous creatures in the world. My mind races through the possibilities. Could it be a snake, a dingo perhaps, or something larger? The rustling grows louder, more insistent. Then, out of the darkness, a figure emerges. For a moment, my heart leaps into my throat. But it's not a predator. It's a joey, a young kangaroo, a male by the looks of it. His eyes wide with curiosity as he cautiously approaches the firelight. He's far too small to have caused the earlier disturbance in the brush. "Hey there, mate," I murmur, trying to keep my voice steady despite the unease churning in my gut. "You're all right. I'm not going to hurt you. Where's your mom?" The kangaroo cocks his head slightly, as if considering my words, then takes a tentative step closer. In that moment, there's a sense of connection, a fleeting bond formed in the wilderness. But the serenity shatters in an instant. The ground beneath me starts trembling, sending ripples through the water, a subtle vibration at first that quickly escalates into a violent shudder. The joey, sensing the danger before I fully grasp it, bolts into the darkness, his powerful legs carrying him swiftly away. For a moment I'm frozen, my mind struggling to make sense of the sudden shift in the peaceful night. "Wait," I call out instinctively, though I know the kangaroo is far beyond hearing me. Pushing aside my blanket, I scramble to my feet, my pain momentarily forgotten in the adrenaline rush. I grab my torch and stumble forward, trying to follow the kangaroo, driven by an inexplicable urge to not be alone in this unsettling moment. Suddenly, the earth in front of me ruptures with a violence that knocks me off my feet. I scramble backwards, my heart pounding in my chest. From the fissure in the ground, a nightmarish creature emerges, its form so bizarre and terrifying that my mind struggles to comprehend it. The skin is a grotesque tapestry of oozing, putrid green, brown, and gray, resembling a patchwork of rot and decay. Slimy tendrils hang from its grotesque, bloated body, swaying with a perverse rhythm. The eyes, glowing a malevolent red, are sunken into its face, framed by sickly, translucent membranes that blink horizontally like the slit pupils of a snake. Frozen in terror, I can only stare as the creature opens its gaping maw, revealing rows of sharp, jagged teeth. A low, gravelly growl emanates from its throat, vibrating through the air and draining the blood from my face. Instinct kicks in, and I know I have to move. I stumble backwards, my injured leg protesting with sharp jabs of pain. The creature lunges forward, its movements surprisingly swift for its size. I dodge to the side, barely avoiding its snapping jaws. I scramble back to the fire, my breath ragged with fear and exertion. The creature is relentless, its every movement filled with predatory purpose. In a desperate bid for defense, I grab a flaming branch from the fire, the embers scattering in a shower of sparks. With every ounce of strength I have, I swing the branch at the monster. The flames lick at its grotesque skin, and it recoils with a hideous screech that pierces the night air. The smell of burning flesh and singed hair fills my nostrils, a nauseating reminder of the surreal danger I'm facing. I don't stop to think. I swing the branch again and again, each strike a desperate plea for survival. The monster, though visibly pained by the flames, is undeterred. It snarls and lunges at me with renewed ferocity, its claws swiping through the air, inches from my face. I retreat, circling the fire, using it as a barrier between myself and this nightmarish foe. I grab my bag, pivot on my heel, and sprint towards the waterfall, the only refuge I can think of. The creature follows, its gravelly roars echoing off the rocky walls. My heart pounds in my ears, drowning out all other sounds except the monster's relentless pursuit. I don't dare look back, focusing only on the path ahead. Reaching the waterfall, I scan the area frantically for any crevice or overhang to hide in. The mist from the fall is thick, shrouding the area in a damp, eerie veil. I can hear the creature's heavy footfalls drawing nearer, the sound growing louder with each passing second. My heart hammers against my ribcage, threatening to burst. In a split-second decision, I dart towards a small overhang near the base of the waterfall. It's a gamble, but it's the only chance I have. The ground is slippery, treacherous, and I struggle to maintain my balance as I move. Just as I reach the overhang, a terrifying realization hits me. It's a dead end. The rocky wall looms high, offering no escape. I feel utterly cornered, trapped. The creature's growls are now just meters away, its menacing presence looming over me. Panic grips me, the fear so intense it's almost paralyzing. My mind races through every possible scenario, but none offer a way out. I brace myself, ready to face the creature, when suddenly, a pair of strong, calloused hands grabs me from behind, covering my mouth. My initial impulse is to struggle, to fight against this new threat, but the hands are insistent, pulling me towards the cascading waterfall. I plunge into the veil of water, a cold, blinding torrent that disorients me further. Is this another threat, or an unexpected ally? Part 2. As I'm pulled through the cascading waterfall, the cool water envelopes me, sending shockwaves through my already exhausted body. The sensation is disorienting, like being caught in a relentless storm. I can hardly see or breathe, but the strong grip on my arms guides me steadily through the torrent. We emerge into a narrow, cramped crevice, hidden behind the waterfall. The space is barely large enough for two people, and I'm pressed close to the stranger in the confined area. The sound of the fall roars just outside, muffling any other noise. The stranger, still gripping my arms, finally releases me and spins me around to face him. I find myself face to face with a young Aboriginal man. His features are strong, weathered by the elements. His eyes are alert, his expression serious but not unkind. He's dressed like a traditional hunter-gatherer, reminiscent of the figures I've seen in history textbooks. His skin is painted with intricate designs, symbols that speak of a deep connection to the land and its lore. He's armed with traditional weapons, including a spear and a boomerang, hanging from a belt made of woven plant fibers. He seems like a man out of time. For a moment, we just stare at each other, both catching our breath. He gestures to me to stay silent, his finger to his lips. The young man, his movements swift and deliberate, reaches into a small leather pouch at his side. He pulls out a handful of fine, ochre-colored powder. Without a word, he spits into the powder, mixing it with practiced ease. He starts smearing the gritty paste over my face, hair, and clothes. His hands are gentle yet efficient, covering every exposed bit of skin. The paste smells like a blend of native plants and herbs, an earthy and almost comforting aroma. As he works, he pauses ever so slightly over my face. There's a flicker of surprise in his eyes, a brief but unmistakable reaction to my fair complexion, so different from his own. But he quickly regains his composure and continues his task. The stranger finishes applying the paste just as the heavy footfalls of the creature grow dangerously close. He draws his spear, his body tensing, ready for the confrontation. His eyes flicker to mine, a silent message to stay quiet and still. Then, piercing through the cacophony, I hear a voice so familiar it sends shivers down my spine. "My little wren, are you there?" it calls, using the secret nickname only my father ever used. The voice is warm, comforting, yet utterly impossible. Every instinct in me wants to rush towards the sound, towards the memory of safety and love that voice represents. I take a step forward, my heart aching with a mixture of hope and disbelief. But the stranger's hand grips my arm firmly, holding me back. His eyes, intense and fearful, meet mine. In them, I see a warning, a plea not to give in to the illusion. The voice outside, rich and familiar, continues to beckon. "It's me, Big Eagle. Don't be afraid." The use of my father's nickname for himself sends a wave of nostalgia and confusion over me. It's as though the past and the present are colliding in this surreal moment. The voice grows more insistent, pleading now. "Willow, please come out. I've missed you, love." It's almost too much to bear, hearing these words from a man I believed was gone forever from my life. The voice outside shifts, no longer just my father's, but now intertwined with the soft tones of a woman and the playful chatter of a child. They speak in a language unfamiliar to me, their words flowing like a gentle stream, melodic and haunting. The voices, though soothing, carry an undercurrent of something sinister, an attempt to lure us from our hiding. My companion clenches his jaw, his hand tightens around the shaft of his spear. I can see the conflict raging within him, a desperate fight against the urge to respond to these ghostly calls. The creature's snout, a grotesque mix of scales and sinew, pushes through the narrow opening of our hiding place. Its breath is hot and fetid, filling the confined space with an oppressive stench. It sniffs around, probing closer and closer to where we crouch in silent terror. I hold my breath, trying to make myself as small as possible. The creature's snout comes mere centimeters from my face, its nostrils flaring as it searches for a scent. My heart pounds so loudly in my chest, I'm afraid it'll give us away. But the paste smeared all over me seems to mask my scent, disguising my foreign smell with the earthy tones of the Australian bush. The creature hesitates, sniffing the air with confusion. It's as if it senses our presence but can't quite pinpoint where we are. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the creature withdraws its snout from the crevice. Its frustrated growls and heavy footsteps recede as it continues its search elsewhere. Time seems to stretch on endlessly. For a moment, neither of us moves, still reeling from the close encounter. Every sound, every shift in the air sets my nerves on edge. But gradually, the oppressive sense of danger begins to fade. The creature's growls and footsteps, once so menacingly close, are now distant echoes. Finally, after what feels like hours, the young man relaxes his posture slightly. His sharp gaze softens as he turns to me, nodding slightly. It's a silent signal that it might be safe to leave our hiding place. We emerge cautiously from behind the waterfall, stepping out into the cool, misty air. The sun rising is just a sliver on the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow on the rugged landscape. The immediate area is quiet, the only sound being the water cascading down the rocks. The stranger gestures for me to follow him, moving with a stealth and grace that speaks of his deep familiarity with this land. We tread lightly, every step measured and deliberate, alert for any sign of the creature. As we move away from the waterfall, the young man suddenly stops and crouches down. He examines the ground closely, tracing a set of tracks with his fingers. They're large and deep, unmistakably those of the creature. Taking a hesitant step forward, I clear my throat softly. "Thank you," I say, my voice barely above a whisper, mindful of the lingering danger. "You saved my life." I pause, waiting for any sign of acknowledgement, but he continues his examination unfazed. I try again, a bit louder this time. "Can you tell me your name?" "Do you know what was that thing we just saw?" My questions hang in the air unanswered. He looks up at me with a perplexed expression, his brow furrowing slightly. In a low, cautious tone, he mutters something in a language I don't recognize. The words are fluid, rich with inflections that are unfamiliar to my ears. Garnering nothing but a blank stare from me, he returns to the tracks. His eyes widen as he picks up a piece of tattered fabric from one of the creature's paw prints. It's a small scrap, but clearly part of a garment, frayed and stained with what looks like dried blood. He holds it up, examining it closely, his expression one of concern. Suddenly, he turns to me and becomes animated, speaking rapidly in his native tongue. His words are a torrent of sounds and syllables that dance around me, completely foreign and incomprehensible. He points emphatically at the scraps, then to the tracks, and finally towards the dense bushland. I watch him, trying to decipher his meaning through his gestures and the urgency in his voice. It's clear he's trying to convey something crucial, something about the creature and perhaps its recent activities. "I'm sorry, I don't understand," I say, my voice tinged with frustration. "Can you please just speak to me in English?" It doesn't even occur to me at the time that he might not know English. He stares at me, his expression hard to read. For a moment, he seems to be weighing his options, his gaze shifting from me to the wilderness around us. Then, without another word, he turns and storms off into the bushland. His departure is swift, a clear sign of his annoyance, or perhaps his need to act quickly. For a moment, I'm stunned, left standing in the early morning light, the sounds of the wilderness enveloping me. The sense of isolation is palpable, and the memory of the creature's terrifying presence is still fresh in my mind. Shaking off my hesitation, I start to follow him. My injuries protest with each step, but the danger of being alone in this environment, especially with that creature out there, overrides my discomfort. "Wait," I call out, my voice echoing slightly in the open space. Catching up to him, I try to keep pace, my breathing heavy from the exertion and pain. "We should stick together," I say, more to myself than to him. He doesn't stop, but I notice he's not moving as fast as he could. It seems like he's consciously slowing down his pace, allowing me to follow close behind despite my injured state. He continues forward, muttering something under his breath in his language. It's a stream of words I can't understand, but the tone suggests distress. We trek through the rugged wilderness, the landscape a blur of reds and greens through my increasingly hazy vision. The throbbing in my head, a dull ache at first, grows into an insistent, pulsating pain. It feels like a drumbeat, relentless and overpowering. My steps become unsteady, each movement sending waves of nausea and dizziness through me. As we navigate the dense underbrush, my vision starts to double, the world around me splitting and merging in a disorienting dance. I blink rapidly, trying to clear my sight, but it only seems to worsen. The edges of my vision darken, the encroaching shadows narrowing my field of view. I can feel the heat of the sun on my back, the sweat trickling down my spine, but it's as if I'm moving through a thick fog. My ears ring, the sounds of the bush muted and distant. I try to focus on the young man leading the way, his figure now a nondescript silhouette in front of me. I want to call out, to tell him that something is wrong, but my tongue feels heavy, my throat dry. With each step, the pain in my head spikes, a sharp contrast to the numbness that starts to creep into my limbs. I stumble, my feet tangling in the underbrush, and my hand reaches out, grasping for support. But there's nothing to hold on to. My knees buckle, and I feel myself falling. The ground rushes up to meet me, a collision that seems both imminent and surreal. In that moment, a wave of helplessness washes over me, a sense of impending doom. But the impact never comes. Instead, there's a sudden, jarring halt as strong arms catch me, preventing me from crashing to the earth. I barely register the sensation of being lifted, my body too heavy, too disconnected from my mind. The last thing I remember is the sensation of being carried, the steady rhythm of footsteps, a faint echo in the growing darkness of my mind. As I slowly regain consciousness, the world comes back into focus with a soft blur. The gentle sway of leaves above me creates a kaleidoscope of light and shadow. I'm lying on a bed of green foliage under a sprawling eucalyptus tree, its distinct aromatic scent filling the air around me. I try to sit up, but a sharp pain in my head forces me back down. That's when I notice the stranger sitting beside me, his watchful eyes fixed on my face. He holds out a container, crafted from the bark of a tree, filled with clear, cool water. With his help, I manage to take a few sips, the water bringing a much-needed relief to my parched throat. He then gently examines my head, his fingers probing with a careful, practiced touch. There's a tenderness in his actions. He's collected various plants and herbs, some of which I recognize as native remedies. With skilled hands, he starts to apply a poultice to my head wound. The cool mixture stings at first, but soon a soothing sensation replaces the pain. Once he's done, he sits back, giving me space. His gaze wanders to the horizon, lost in thoughts I can't begin to comprehend. I take the opportunity to observe him more closely. His face, etched with lines of experience, tells a story of a life lived in harmony with nature. His eyes, dark and deep, reflect a world that is both beautiful and brutal. Gathering my strength, I make another attempt to communicate with the stranger. "Thanks again. My name's Willow, by the way," I say, hand outstretched. His expression remains stoic, his eyes revealing nothing. "Do you understand me?" I ask tentatively, my voice weak but hopeful. He watches me, his face unreadable. He doesn't respond, and it becomes increasingly clear that he might not understand English. This realization strikes me as odd. Even the most isolated Aboriginal communities have some exposure to English. As I lie there, pondering our communication barrier, I observe him more closely. His attire, his tools, the way he interacts with the environment, it all seems different. Not just traditional, but ancient, untouched by the modern world. A thought begins to form in my mind, a possibility so incredible that it borders on the fantastical. Could he be from an uncontacted people? I sit up, contemplating the possibility, my mind racing. I've heard stories about the Pintupi Nine, the group of indigenous Australians who walked out of the desert in 1984, having lived in isolation from the outside world. But that was nearly 40 years earlier, and the idea of stumbling upon an uncontacted tribe in Australia in 2023 seems almost as unbelievable as the monstrous creature we'd just encountered. Yet, as I watch him methodically tend to the surrounding area, arranging stones, checking the wind direction, and occasionally glancing at the sky, I can't help but wonder. He notices my scrutiny and meets my gaze. There's a brief moment where our eyes lock, a silent exchange. Humoring the possibility, I point to myself, using slow, deliberate gestures. "Willow," I repeat, tapping my chest. He watches, his expression thoughtful. Then, mimicking my action, he taps his own chest and says, "Jura." My companion has a name, and it's Jura. Ecstatic at the breakthrough, my heart leaps. "Jura," I repeat, a smile breaking through my pain and exhaustion. It's a small connection, but it feels monumental, like a bridge across the unfathomable chasm between us. But then, a grim thought crosses my mind, casting a shadow over my brief moment of joy. Here I am, a modern woman with all the germs and microbes of a world far removed from Jura's. The sudden realization hits me hard. I could be a walking, talking petri dish of pathogens to which you might have no immunity. Memories of historical accounts where explorers and settlers inadvertently introduced diseases to indigenous populations flash through my mind. The consequences were often catastrophic. A shiver runs down my spine at the thought of being responsible for such a tragedy. I rummage through my first aid kit. My fingers, still slightly unsteady from my recent ordeal, search for a face mask. Finding one, I quickly put it on, securing it firmly over my nose and mouth. I can't completely eliminate the risk, but I can minimize it. Jura watches me with a mix of curiosity and confusion. He doesn't understand the reason behind this strange new addition to my face, but he remains silent, his eyes following my every move. I reach back into my backpack, gingerly pulling out my notebook. It's a bit damp from our earlier plunge through the waterfall, but the contents are mostly intact. Flipping through the pages, I find what I'm looking for: photos of me in Perth. I show Jura the pictures, pointing to the tall buildings, the crowded streets, and the images of me in various urban settings. I tap the photo and then point to myself, trying to convey that this is where I come from. Home, I say slowly. That's where I'm from. Jura leans in, his eyes scanning the images with a mix of wonder and perplexity. He touches the photos lightly, tracing the outlines of the skyscrapers and the unfamiliar faces in the pictures. He looks up at me, then back at the photo, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. Encouraged by Jura's reaction, I flip to a blank page in my notebook. Taking out a pen, I demonstrate its use, drawing a simple outline of the terrain we're in. I then hand the pen to Jura, gesturing towards the notebook and then at the photos. I want him to draw where he's from, to share a part of his world as I've shared mine. Jura takes the pen, examining it with a curious gaze. He tentatively places the tip on the paper and starts to draw. His movements are cautious at first, but they soon become more fluid, revealing a natural talent for expression. A village emerges on the page. He adds several huts, arranged in a circle, and a larger central structure that seems to be a communal area. He adds a figure, presumably himself, depicted as walking away from the village. The figure is alone, separate from the other elements of the drawing, imparting a sense of solitude and departure. I'm no anthropologist, but through my schooling and cultural sensitivity training as a ranger, I've learned about various aspects of Aboriginal cultures. One concept that comes to mind is that of the walkabout, a rite of passage in which young Aboriginal men embark on a journey into the wilderness, living off the land for a period to transition into manhood and gain spiritual enlightenment. As I ponder over Jura's drawing, the eerie encounter with the creature still looms large in my thoughts. I decide to communicate this experience with Jura, hoping he might have some insight or knowledge about what we faced. I start sketching the creature as best as I can recall. The grotesque features, the scaly skin, the malevolent eyes, I try to capture every detail that's etched into my memory. My hand trembles slightly as I draw, the image stirring renewed terror. Finishing the sketch, I turn the notebook to show Jura. "Do you know what this is?" I ask. His reaction is immediate and intense. His eyes widen and he recoils slightly, a look of recognition and fear crossing his face. He begins speaking rapidly, his voice urgent. One word stands out, repeated several times with emphasis: bunyip. Jura's hand shakes as he takes the notebook from me, his eyes locked on the sketch of the bunyip. With a sense of urgency, he begins drawing a line from the monstrous figure to the village he had depicted earlier. The line he draws is jagged, almost erratic, as if to symbolize the chaotic and unpredictable nature of the bunyip. He taps the line repeatedly, his eyes meeting mine with a piercing intensity. It's clear to me now why he was in such a rush. He fears the bunyip is heading towards his village, or worse, that it might already be there. Part 3. Jura and I sit in silence for a while, each lost in our own thoughts. The revelation of the bunyip, a creature of Aboriginal legend, now terrifyingly real, hangs heavy between us. The urgency in Jura's eyes tells me that we can't delay, His village might be in danger. As I test my strength, I find the sharp pains have dulled to a manageable ache. My head still throbs, but the world no longer spins uncontrollably. I nod to Jura, signaling that I'm ready to move. He offers me a hand, pulling me to my feet. We set out at a steady pace, Jura leading the way. He moves with a quiet confidence, each step purposeful. I follow closely, relying on my ranger training to keep up. Our journey is mostly silent, the only sounds being our footsteps and the distant calls of birds and insects. Every so often, Jura pauses to examine the ground or the brush, ensuring we're not walking into danger. His vigilance is both reassuring and a reminder of the perils we face. We travel throughout the day, the sun charting its relentless course across the sky. Our only respite comes in brief, stolen moments of rest under the shade of sparse trees or rocky outcrops. Each time we stop, it's for no more than a few minutes, just long enough to catch our breath and sip sparingly from our dwindling water supply. The terrain varies as we move, from flat, open plains to rocky ridges and shallow valleys. The landscape is harsh but breathtaking in its raw beauty. As dusk approaches, the sky transforms into a canvas of deep oranges and purples, the sun dipping below the horizon. The beauty of the sunset is a contrast to the exhaustion that clings to us like a second skin. My body aches with every step. It's been over 24 hours since I've slept, the events of the day blurring into a relentless, adrenaline-fueled ordeal. My eyes sting from fatigue, my movements slower, less precise. I glance over at Jura. His endurance is remarkable, but the signs of fatigue are there, subtle but unmistakable. The slight droop in his shoulders, the brief moments where his pace slows, the faint lines of strain around his eyes, all indicators that he too is pushing his limits. I gesture to him, miming sleep with my hands clasped together and resting my cheek against them. "We should rest," I say, my voice a hoarse whisper in the growing twilight. His response is immediate and firm, a shake of the head, a determined look in his eyes. He set on continuing, driven by the urgency to protect his village. I understand his concern, but I know too well the dangers of pushing our bodies beyond their limits. "We need to sleep, even for just a little while," I insist, hoping my tone gets my meaning across. "We'll be no good to anyone if we collapse from exhaustion." Jura hesitates, clearly torn between the need to press on and the reality of our physical limits. His eyes betray a moment of vulnerability, a silent acknowledgement of my words. Yet he nods curtly, signaling his decision to continue regardless. Navigating under the starlit sky, Jura often pauses, tilting his head upwards. In these moments, I notice him aligning our path with the Southern Cross, using the constellation as a guide through the dark. As the darkness deepens, our journey becomes increasingly perilous. The lack of light turns every shadow into a potential threat, every rustle in the bush a cause for alarm. I keep a close eye on him, aware that in this state, even a seasoned tracker like Jura is susceptible to the dangers of the wilderness. It happens suddenly. Jura steps onto a loose stone on a narrow ridge, his foot sliding out from under him. He stumbles, his arms flailing for balance, but fatigue has robbed him of his usual grace. For a heart-stopping moment, he teeters on the edge of a steep drop. Without thinking, I lunge forward, grabbing his arm and pulling him back with all my strength. The sudden motion sends a jolt of pain through my injured wrist, but I barely register it. We both tumble to the ground, a tangle of limbs just centimeters from the precipice. For a moment, we lie there, panting heavily, the realization of what almost happened settling in. Jura sits up slowly, his gaze lingering on the edge of the ridge, then turns to me. There's a newfound respect in his eyes, an acknowledgement of our mutual reliance. He nods slowly, conceding to the necessity of rest. We find a small, sheltered area nestled between two large boulders, providing some protection from the elements and any roaming wildlife. Jura sets to work immediately, gathering dry twigs and leaves while I use my lighter to start a fire. The flames catch quickly, casting a warm, reassuring glow in the encroaching darkness. As the fire crackles and pops, Jura reaches into his pouch and brings out something wrapped in leaves. He unwraps it carefully, revealing a small portion of smoked meat and some native berries. He hands me a portion with a nod. I humbly accept his offering. The food, though simple, tastes delicious to my empty stomach. In return, I open my backpack and take out some of my emergency rations, a couple of energy bars, and a packet of dried fruit and nuts. I offer them to Jura, watching as he examines them with curiosity before tentatively tasting them. He seems pleasantly surprised by the flavors, nodding his approval. After we finish our meal, a comfortable silence settles between us, broken only by the crackling of the fire. I watch the flames dance, their warmth soothing my aching body. As I sit there, I'm struck by a deep sense of gratitude towards Jura for saving me from the bunyip. I feel a compelling need to express my thanks in a tangible way. I dig through my backpack, my fingers brushing past various items until they find what I'm looking for, my Swiss Army knife. Holding it out to Jura, I say, "I want you to have this." My voice is firm, underscored with sincerity. As a thank you for saving my life. I take a moment to demonstrate its various tools: the knife, the screwdriver, the tiny scissors, and the can opener. Jura looks at the knife, his eyes tracing its contours. He takes it, turning it over in his hands, examining its various functions. He seems to understand its value, not just as a tool, but as a gesture of gratitude and respect. In response, Jura reaches for something tied to his belt. It's his boomerang, its surface smooth and worn from use. The wood is dark, rich in color, and adorned with intricate carvings that tell a story I can't decipher. He offers it to me with solemn dignity. I accept the weapon with a sense of awe and reverence, my fingers gently tracing the intricate carvings etched into its surface. "Thanks, mate," I say, my voice thick with emotion. "I promise to cherish this." Jura nods, a faint smile touching his lips, his eyes reflecting the fire's glow. Jura sits close to the fire, his posture rigid, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the flickering flames. As the night deepens, his eyelids droop occasionally, and his head nods forward before he snaps back to alertness. I notice his struggle. Through a series of gestures, I suggest taking turns sleeping, ensuring one of us is always on the lookout. I tap my chest and then point to the surrounding darkness, indicating that I'll take the first watch while he rests. At first, Jura resists, but after a few more insistent gestures from me, he gives in. He arranges himself on the ground, using his pouch as a makeshift pillow. His eyes linger on me for a moment, an unspoken thanks, before he finally closes them. As I keep watch, I take out my notebook and begin jotting down the events of the day. I pause occasionally, glancing at Jura to ensure he's still sleeping peacefully, and then at the surrounding darkness, half expecting the nightmarish creature to reappear. I don't know when I fell asleep, but my exhaustion must have overtaken me. In the silence of the outback night, with Jura resting beside me, I drift into a dream. It's vivid, filled with the sharp clarity of memories that have long been etched in my heart. I'm 15 again, back in Cape Range National Park, under the vast expanse of the starlit sky. The air is crisp, filled with the scent of eucalyptus and the distant sound of the ocean. Dad and I are sitting by the campfire, just like we've done countless times before. He's telling me about one of his adventures. It's during one of these stories that I find the courage to break the news to him. "Dad," I start hesitantly, my voice barely above a whisper, "Mom's getting remarried." The words hang in the air, heavy with the weight of change they carry. He doesn't react immediately, his expression unreadable. Then he sighs, a sound that seems to carry a weight of unspoken thoughts. "I see," he finally says. "I'm happy for her." His voice is steady, but I can hear the faintest trace of something else in it, maybe sadness, maybe resignation. He looks at me, his eyes reflecting the flickering flames, a mix of emotions playing across his features. "I hope he makes her happy," he adds, his voice tinged with a bittersweet edge. His heart is so torn that it breaks mine. I rush in, the words tumbling out in a torrent. "I can't stand him. Mark, he's a arsehole." I struggle to find the right words to express how much I loathe my future stepfather, but they all fall short. He's just. He's not you, I finish lamely, feeling a profound sadness. You know, Ren, he says, sometimes people come into our lives and we don't get to choose. What matters is how we respond to them. I feel a surge of frustration, mixed with a desperate longing for an escape. I could run away. It'll be just you and me. We can live out here, away from everything. He chuckles softly, a sound that seems both sad and fond. You're my wild spirit, he says. But life isn't about running away. It's about facing what comes and finding your path through it. He sees the tears brimming in my eyes, a mix of frustration and youthful defiance. Hey, I got you something for your birthday, he says, gently changing the subject, reaching into his backpack. He pulls out the leather-bound notebook, the same one I've been carrying during my ordeal. For all your adventures, big and small, he adds with a smile. I wipe away my tears and take the notebook, tracing my fingers over its cover. He looks at me, his eyes softening. You know that I love you, right? He asks. That I'd do everything in my power to make sure you're not hurt. I lean into him, wrapping my arms around his sturdy frame. Of course I know, Dad, I say, my voice muffled against his jacket. I love you too. You're going to be all right, Willow, he says softly. No matter what life throws your way, remember you're stronger than you think. The dream shifts, the warmth of the campfire replaced by the chilling cold of dawn. I wake to find my father gone, his sleeping bag empty, his boots still by the fire. Panic grips me, a tight knot in my stomach. I call out for him, my voice breaking the morning stillness, but there's no response. I scramble to my feet, my heart racing. The notebook falls from my lap, landing open on the ground. The memories of our last night together swirl in my mind, a mix of love and foreboding. The campsite is undisturbed, his belongings left as if he intended to return. But there's an eerie silence, a sense of absence that's palpable. I grab a flashlight and start searching the surrounding area, the beam of light cutting through the pre-dawn darkness. I call his name over and over, my voice growing hoarse. The landscape is unyielding, offering no clues, no signs of his passage. I stumble upon a small clearing, and there in the dirt are footprints. They're his, I'm sure of it. My heart leaps with a mixture of hope and dread. As I follow the tracks, the terrain becomes more rugged, the earth giving way to limestone. The footprints lead directly to a cliff face, the ground ending abruptly in a sheer drop to the ocean below. There at the edge, the footprints come to an abrupt halt. No signs of return, no further path to follow. My breath catches in my throat, a silent sob trapped in the cage of my ribs. The implications hang in the air, heavy and unspoken. The cold, gray light of dawn casts long shadows across the ground, shadows that seem to stretch into the void below. I inch closer, peering over the edge with a mix of fear and desperation. But there's nothing to see, just the endless expanse of water meeting sky, a horizon that offers no answers, only questions. A deep, hollow feeling settles in my chest, a void where hope used to reside. I fall to my knees, the damp earth clinging to my pajama pants. My father, my mentor and guide, chose to walk away from everything for me. Suddenly, amidst the oppressive silence, a familiar voice calls out from behind me. Willow. I whirl around, my heart leaping into my throat. There, against all logic, stands my dad. He looks the same, the early morning light casting familiar shadows across his face. Disbelief, relief, and skepticism war within me. Dad, my voice is a whisper, tinged with a hope I'm afraid to fully embrace. He steps forward, his presence undeniably real. I'm here, little Wren, he says, his voice carrying the warmth I remember so well. I step forward, each movement filled with a mix of fear and longing. How is this possible? I ask, my voice trembling. He opens his arms, a gesture of reassurance and comfort. I've always been here. You just had to find me. I step towards him, drawn by the familiarity and warmth of his presence. Yet, as I move closer, a sense of unease creeps into my heart. Something about his appearance, his aura, feels off. "What happened to you?" I ask, my voice laced with doubt. "You've grown strong, Willow," he smiles, but it's a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. "But are you strong enough to face the truth?" "Dad, you're scaring me," I whisper, my heart pounding. His smile widens, but it's not the warm, comforting expression I remember. Instead, it twists into something mocking, a grin that sends shivers down my spine. Suddenly, he erupts into laughter, a sound so jarring and inhuman that it freezes me in place. The laughter echoes around us, bouncing off the cliffs and filling the air with a sinister resonance. As I watch in horror, my dad's form begins to shift, to contort in ways that defy reality. His skin ripples and bulges, his features distorting grotesquely. I take a step back, my breath caught in my throat. The man who was my father is transforming, his body expanding and twisting into a monstrous shape. The familiar features melt away, revealing the scaly, mottled skin of the bunyip. Its eyes, glowing a deep, malevolent red, fix on me with a terrifying intensity. Desperation and fear grip me, but they also bring a lucid clarity. This isn't real. I'm having a nightmare. I need to wake up. Just as the ghoulish creature prepares to lunge at me, a primal, instinctive part of my mind screams at me to take drastic steps to jolt myself awake. I glance over the edge of the cliff, the drop seeming like an endless chasm into the abyss. It's a terrifying choice, but it's the only way I can think of to break free from this horrific dream. Taking a deep breath, I step back, gathering every ounce of courage and resolve within me. With a final, defiant glance at the monster, I sprint off the cliff's edge. Part 4. I can feel the rush of air, the sensation of weightlessness as I fall off the cliff. It's a terrifying, exhilarating moment, a leap into the unknown. My stomach churns, my heart races, every sense heightened to an almost unbearable intensity. The water below seems to rush up to meet me, the vast expanse of ocean a blur of color and motion. But before I can brace for impact, I'm jolted awake. It's a sudden, violent awakening, my body lurching upright as if pulled by unseen strings. My breath comes in ragged gasps, my heart pounding against my ribcage. I'm disoriented, the remnants of the nightmare clinging to me like a cold mist. It's early morning, the first light of dawn casting a soft glow on the surrounding landscape. The fire has died down to embers, its warmth a fading memory. I'm back in the outback, the nightmare of the cliff and the monstrous bunyip fading into the surreal world of dreams. But a new panic sets in as I quickly realize that Jura is nowhere to be seen. His sleeping spot is empty, the ground still bearing the imprint of his body. My eyes dart around the campsite, searching for any sign of him, any clue to where he might have gone. His belongings are still here, just like my dad's were that morning when I discovered he was gone. My heart sinks and a wave of desolation washes over me. Did Jura too choose to walk away? Why would he leave without a word, especially after everything we've been through together? My mind races through possibilities, each more disheartening than the last. Did he sense some danger and go to investigate? Or did he simply decide that our paths no longer aligned, leaving me to face the wilderness alone? I stand up, my body stiff and sore from the restless sleep and the events of the past days. My first instinct is to call out for him, but I restrain myself, aware that any noise might attract unwanted attention, perhaps even from the bunyip itself. I start to pace around the campsite, scanning the area for any clues. There are tracks leading away. They're Jura as I recognize the unique pattern of his footprints. They head off into the bushland, but there's no clear indication of why he left or where he might be going. But then, just as the sun fully breaks the horizon, casting long shadows on the red earth, I see a figure approaching. It's Jura, his stride confident, carrying something in his hand. A flood of relief washes over me. As he comes closer, I notice he's carrying a dead sangona, the monitor lizard's long, slender body limp in his grasp. In his other hand, he holds a collection of wild herbs, freshly gathered. Jura lays the items down near the remnants of our campfire. He meets my gaze briefly, a flicker of something akin to an apology in his eyes, before he gets to work. He carefully extracts the venom from the gona, his movements precise and skilled. The venom, a potent neurotoxin, is something I've read about in my ranger training, but never seen handled in person. With deliberate care, he mixes the venom with the herbs he gathered, grinding them together with a small, flat stone. The mixture becomes a thick, dark paste, its consistency perfect for his purpose. Jura looks up at me, his eyes communicating a silent warning of the mixture's lethal nature. Then, with a steady hand, he applies the paste to the tip of his spear, ensuring an even coating. I watch, captivated by the demonstration of a skill passed down through generations, a skill that has likely saved his life more than once. He then turns to the Swiss Army knife I had gifted him, applying the same mixture to its blade with deliberate care. Curious about his actions, I hold up the boomerang he had given me, raising an inquiring eyebrow. "This too?" I ask. Jura nods in confirmation. He carefully applies a thin layer of the venom herb mixture along its edges, transforming the simple wooden tool into a deadly weapon. As Jura completes his meticulous preparation of our weapons, he suddenly gestures towards my notebook. I pick it up and hand it to him, along with the pen. He flips to a blank page and starts to sketch with a focused intensity. The lines he draws take shape, forming the image of the bunyip. He portrays it standing on its hind limbs, its menacing form dominating the page. Then, with precise strokes, Jura adds two smaller figures next to the creature, one holding a spear, the other with a boomerang. He points to a specific spot on the creature's underbelly in the drawing, circling it multiple times. It seems he's identified a vulnerability, a target for us to aim for in our battle against the creature. Jura says something in his language, his tone suggesting a question. Though I don't understand his words, his meaning is clear. He's asking if I comprehend the plan. I nod, meeting his gaze with grim determination. "I understand," I reply. As we approach the vicinity of Jura village, the terrain changes subtly. The bushland gives way to a more open landscape. The village is nestled in a secluded valley, surrounded by high ridges that offer both protection and isolation. It's a hidden gem, an oasis of calm in the harsh Australian wilderness. We approach the village with a growing sense of dread, the signs of devastation becoming increasingly apparent. The once vibrant community, as depicted in Jura's drawing, is now a scene of utter desolation. The air is thick with the acrid scent of smoke and something else, something far more sinister. Entering the perimeter of the village, the full extent of the tragedy unfolds before us. The huts are reduced to smoldering ruins. The communal areas are destroyed, their sacred grounds desecrated. The most disturbing sight, however, is the bodies. The men of the village, warriors and hunters, lie scattered across the landscape. Their final moments seem to tell a story of a fierce, desperate battle against an unimaginable foe. The marks on their bodies, deep gashes and wounds, match the fearsome characteristics of the bunyip we encountered. Jura moves through the village with a hollow, haunted look in his eyes. Each body he passes, he stops, his hands gently closing their eyes in a final act of respect and farewell. His grief is palpable, a silent scream of pain and loss that echoes through the empty village. I stand there, feeling utterly helpless, my heart heavy with sorrow for Jura and his people. I want to offer comfort, but words seem meaningless in the face of such devastation. Jura's steps grow heavier, laden with an unspeakable pain. He finally falls to his knees amidst the ruins, his entire frame shaking with silent sobs. It's a heart-wrenching sight, a proud and strong man, brought to the brink by the loss of everything he held dear. His anguished prayers, spoken in his native tongue, fill the air, a haunting melody of sorrow and despair. His grief is a tangible force, a raw, open wound that transcends language and culture. I recall the day I lost my dad, the confusion and heartache that followed. But Jura's loss is on a scale I can't even begin to comprehend. He's not just mourning a single person. He's grieving for his entire world, a community and way of life that has been torn away from him in the most brutal manner. Gently, I kneel beside him, offering my presence as a silent source of support. I place a tentative hand on his shoulder, unsure if my touch is welcome, but feeling the need to bridge the gap of isolation that surrounds him. I wrap my arms around him in a comforting embrace. He leans into me, his cries muffled against my shoulder. "I'm here for you, Jura," I whisper softly, my voice barely above the whisper of the wind through the charred remains of his home. "You're not alone in this." The words feel inadequate, but they're all I have to offer in the face of such overwhelming sorrow. Jura's sobs subside abruptly as his attention shifts to something in the distance. Following his gaze, I notice a series of footprints amidst the devastated village. Unlike the chaotic scuffles and heavy tracks from the battle, these are smaller, more measured, possibly those of women and children. Jura stands up, his body language changing from one of defeat to determination. He gestures for me to follow and starts tracking the footprints with a renewed sense of purpose. As we follow the trail, it becomes clear that these are not random or aimless tracks. They are purposeful, leading away from the carnage, deeper into the wilderness. The possibility that some of his people might have escaped the Bunyip's wrath instills a new urgency in our steps. Jura and I venture deeper into the wilderness, the terrain becoming increasingly treacherous and unfamiliar. The tracks lead us through dense bushland, across rocky gorges, and along the banks of a serpentine river. The sun is high, casting sharp shadows that play tricks on our eyes, but we press on, driven by the hope of finding survivors. As the hours pass, a heavy silence settles over the land. It's as if nature itself is holding its breath, aware of the dark presence lurking nearby. The tracks lead us to the entrance of a vast cave network, hidden beneath an overhang of twisted roots and ancient stone. The mouth of the cave is wide and dark, an abyss that swallows the morning sunlight. Stalagmites and stalactites jut out like jagged teeth, giving the cave entrance the appearance of a massive, petrified beast. Jura pauses at the entrance, his eyes scanning the shadows within. There's an unspoken understanding between us that we might be walking into the very heart of danger. He places a reassuring hand on my shoulder, his gaze firm and resolute. Taking a deep breath, we both smear a final layer of the ochre paste over our faces to conceal our scent. Jura leads the way into the cave, his steps silent and cautious. I follow, every sense heightened, my heart pounding in my chest. Inside the cave, the atmosphere changes dramatically, as if stepping through a threshold into another realm. The air is cooler, the light dim, filtered through cracks and crevices in the rocky ceiling. The walls are adorned with ancient handprints that glow softly, emitting a spectral light that seems to pulse with a life of its own. I'm reminded of the Aboriginal concept of dreamtime, where the past, present, and future converge. The further we venture, the more the cave transforms. Stalactites hang from the ceiling like chandeliers. The haunting sound of a didgeridoo resonates through the cave, its deep, rhythmic drone vibrating in the air around us. The melody is both mournful and soothing. We follow the haunting sound of the didgeridoo, its resonance guiding us deeper into the cave. The path narrows, winding through towering stalagmites that rise from the ground like silent sentinels. The melody grows louder, its rhythmic pulse echoing off the cave walls. We turn a corner, and the cave opens into a large chamber, bathed in a soft, otherworldly light. The source of the light is a natural skylight, a gap in the rock through which the sun streams, casting a warm glow over the space. In the chamber, illuminated by the sun's gentle light, we find them the survivors of Jura's village. Women, children, and a few elderly members of the tribe huddle together, their eyes wide. They're a small group, a mere fraction of the village's original population, but at least they're alive. The didgeridoo player, an elder with a weathered face and wise eyes, sits cross-legged near the group. As we enter, he pauses, his gaze shifting to us. There's a moment of tension, a silent assessment, before recognition dawns in his eyes. Jura rushes forward, his voice breaking as he calls out in his native tongue. The survivors respond with a mixture of shock and joy, their initial fear giving way to tearful reunions. Mothers clutch their children closer, tears streaming down their faces, while the elderly reach out to touch Jura, as if to assure themselves that he is real. I stand back, watching the emotional reunion, feeling both an outsider and a witness to something profoundly emotional. The children, curious and resilient despite the horrors they faced, begin to inch closer to me, their eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and caution. A young girl, no more than 5 or 6, bravely steps forward and offers me a shy smile. I kneel down and return her smile, touched by her gesture of friendship. "Hey there, sweetie," I say. She reaches out, her small fingers tentatively touching my curly blonde hair, mirroring her own. Her eyes widen in wonder, as if she's found a connection between us, a common thread in an otherwise unfamiliar world. I laugh softly, encouraging her curiosity. "It's just like yours, isn't it?" I say gently. The reunion, though heartwarming, is tragically short-lived. Just as the atmosphere begins to settle into one of cautious relief, a chilling sound pierces the air, echoing ominously through the cave. It's a deep, gravelly growl, a sound so menacing and primal that it instantly sends a wave of terror through the chamber. The survivors freeze, their expressions morphing into ones of pure fear. The children huddle closer to their mothers, their small faces etched with terror. Jura's head snaps up, his eyes narrowing as he listens intently. The grim look on his face tells me all I need to know. The bunyip is close, perhaps closer than we dared to think. The sound reverberates through the cave, a relentless echo that seems to come from every direction, disorienting and confusing. We quickly begin organizing the survivors, directing them towards a narrow passageway at the back of the chamber. It's a tight squeeze, but it offers the only viable escape route. The bunyip's growls grow louder, more insistent. Its presence is like a tangible shadow, creeping closer with each passing second. The air in the cave becomes thick with tension, the fear almost palpable. Jura takes the lead, guiding the survivors through the passageway with quiet urgency. I follow at the rear, ensuring that no one is left behind. We move as quickly as we can, but the passage is narrow and winding, forcing us to proceed in a single file. The walls close in around us, the air thick and heavy. The only sound is the shuffling of feet and the occasional whimper of fear from the children. As we squirm our way through the confining passage, the sound of the bunyip's growls intensifies, a constant, unnerving presence that seems to vibrate through the very walls of the cave. Its growls, low and resonant, echo around us, creating a disorienting cacophony of sound. The realization hits me with chilling clarity. The bunyip is using a form of echolocation, its growls bouncing off the walls and guiding it towards our location. Our group, huddled together and moving en masse, is like a beacon, reflecting the sound waves back to the creature. Jura and I exchange glances. We both understand we need to disperse the group, to break the single mass that the bunyip's sounds are bouncing off of. Jura communicates this to the survivors in hushed, urgent tones. We reach a wider chamber within the cave, a natural crossroads with 2 tunnels leading in different directions. Jura quickly assesses the situation and instructs the survivors to head down one tunnel, speaking with a quiet authority that spurs them into action. He then turns to me, his expression resolute. He points down the tunnel the survivors are taking, signaling for me to follow them. I nod in understanding, ready to follow the survivors to ensure their safety. But as I turn to leave, I notice Jura isn't joining us. Instead, he heads down the other tunnel, banging his spear loudly against the walls. The understanding of what he's doing hits me instantly. He's acting as a decoy, drawing the bunyip's attention away from the group to give them a chance to escape. I hesitate for a moment, torn between the instinct to survive and the knowledge that Jura is knowingly walking into grave danger. But as he disappears into the darkness of the tunnel, I can't bring myself to leave him behind. After everything we've endured together, the idea of abandoning him to face the bunyip alone is unthinkable. I quickly turn back, following Jura's path. As I catch up to him, he whirls around, his expression one of frustration. He shakes his head, gesturing emphatically for me to go with the others. But I stand firm, meeting his gaze. "I'm not leaving you," I say, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. We face this together. Jura starts to protest, but he sees the resolve in my eyes. He reluctantly nods, understanding that I won't be swayed. The path twists and turns, leading us deeper into the heart of the cave. As we move, the ceiling gradually rises, opening into a larger chamber with high, vaulted ceilings. Stalagmites jut out from the ground, creating a natural labyrinth. The growls of the bunyip grow louder, more frenzied. It's as if the creature is closing in on us from all sides, its presence felt but not yet seen. The anticipation is almost as terrifying as the creature itself, a life or death game of cat and mouse. As we move forward, the air in the cave grows colder, a chill that seems to seep into my bones. Jura and I exchange tense glances, our hands gripping our weapons tightly, ready for the confrontation we know is coming. Suddenly, without warning, the ground in front of us explodes in a shower of rocks and dust. The bunyip bursts forth from the earth. Its mottled green skin glistens in the faint light, and its malevolent red eyes fixate on us with chilling intensity. The creature is larger and more terrifying than I remembered, its presence dominating the chamber. The bunyip circles us, its movements deceptively agile for its size. It's toying with us, enjoying the game of predator and prey. Jura and I, despite our determination, are painfully aware of our disadvantage. We're fighting a creature of legend, a being that embodies the very essence of the wilderness's unforgiving nature. We dash through the maze of stalagmites, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. Our strategy is simple yet fraught with risk. Keep moving, stay unpredictable, and look for an opening to strike. The stalagmites provide temporary cover, but they also hinder our movement, forcing us to weave and dodge through the tight spaces. I glance back, catching a glimpse of the bunyip closing in. Its massive body scrapes against the stone, its claws leaving deep gashes in the earth. We take a sharp turn, hoping to lose the creature in the twisted pathways. But as we round a bend, the bunyip appears before us, blocking our path. Jura lunges forward, his spear aimed at the creature's underbelly, the spot he had marked in his drawing. But the creature dodges Jura's thrusts, its movements eerily agile. It counters with a swipe of its massive claw, narrowly missing Jura, who jumps out of the way at the last second. I rush forward, swinging the boomerang gifted me with all my might. The creature turns its attention to me, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. I strike, the boomerang connecting with a sickening thud against its thick hide. But it's like hitting a wall of stone, the creature barely flinches. The bunyip launches at me, its massive jaws open wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. I roll to the side, narrowly avoiding its bite. The creature's tail whips around, catching me off guard and sending me sprawling to the ground. Jura, seeing me in danger, rushes to my aid. He swings his spear with precision. The bunyip, sensing the threat, pivots swiftly, disarming Jura with a powerful flick of its paw. The spear clatters to the ground, just out of his reach. The creature turns its full wrath on Jura, pinning him to the ground with its massive form. In a desperate move, Jura reaches for the Swiss Army knife I gave him. With all his strength, he plunges the knife into the creature's side. The bunyip recoils with a deafening roar, releasing Jura from its grasp. Dark blood oozes from the wound, a clear sign that Jura's attack has found its mark. But it's not enough. The creature, though wounded, is still a formidable force, its eyes burning with rage. Holding the boomerang in my hands, I feel its weight and balance in my hands. It's nothing like the toy boomerangs I've thrown before. This is a weapon honed for survival. The bunyip doesn't notice me regaining my footing. My eyes dart around, desperately seeking an advantage. Then I see it a massive, jagged stalactite hanging precariously above where the bunyip stands. It's a long shot, but it's all we have. In that moment, time seems to slow down. I can hear my heart pounding in my ears, the sound of my breath ragged and quick. I think of my father, of the lessons he taught me about facing fear head-on. Channeling every ounce of strength and focus I possess, I hurl the boomerang with all my might. The boomerang cuts through the air, whistling as it arcs towards its target. My heart races as it nears its target, the moment stretching out, each second a lifetime. With a resounding crack, the boomerang strikes the stalactite. The impact sends a shudder through the cavern, a vibration that resonates through the very bones of the earth. The stone, already teetering on the edge of stability, begins to break free from the ceiling. The bunyip, sensing the danger, looks up just as the massive formation detaches, plummeting towards it with the force of gravity. There's no time for it to react, no time to escape. The stalactite crashes down upon the creature with a thunderous roar, engulfing it in a cloud of dust and debris. The jagged shards of stone pierce through the bunyip's tough, scaly skin. The creature lets out an earth-shattering roar, a sound filled with pain and fury. It writhes violently, its massive body struggling under the weight of the stone protruding from it, exposing its soft underbelly in a desperate attempt to free itself. Jura, seizing the moment, retrieves his spear from where it had fallen. He sets it in a spear thrower, a simple but effective tool that amplifies the force and distance of his throw. In a fluid, almost poetic motion, Jura draws back his arm and launches the spear. The spear flies through the air with deadly accuracy, its trajectory unerring. The silence of the cavern is pierced by the sound of the projectile cutting through the air, a whistle that seems to reverberate with the weight of the moment. The spear strikes true, burying itself deep into the bunyip's heart. The bunyip lets out a final, ear-splitting roar of pain and fury, its body convulsing as the life drains from it. For a few tense moments, the creature thrashes wildly, but each movement grows weaker. Dark, viscous blood pools around it, seeping into the earth. The bunyip's convulsions slowly subside, its massive form collapsing under the weight of its injuries. In a haunting transformation, the monster's grotesque visage morphs, revealing a face I know all too well, my father's. He looks at me with eyes filled with sorrow and pain, his voice echoing through the cavern. "Willow, my little wren, help me," he pleads, his voice a perfect imitation of my dad's. The illusion is so convincing, so heartbreakingly real, that for a moment I'm frozen, my heart torn between reality and the desperate longing to see my father again. Tears well up in my eyes, a mix of grief and anger. This creature, this abomination, dares to use my father's voice, to prey on my deepest sorrows and fears. "You're not him," I say. "He's gone. You can't use his memory against me." The creature, sensing my wavering, continues in my father's voice. "Willow, it's me. I'm here. I've always been here for you." "Dad," I say, my voice trembling but resolute, "you left me. You chose to leave, and I've accepted that you're gone forever. You killed yourself, and nothing can change that." Jura, sensing my pain and seeing through the bunyip's deceit, steps forward with a resolute expression. He pulls out his spear from the creature's chest and, without hesitation, plunges it into its throat. As the spear pierces its throat, the bunyip's illusion shatters. The image of my father fades away, leaving behind the true form of the creature, a monstrous amalgamation of nightmares. Its body shudders violently before finally going still, the light fading from its malevolent red eyes. The cavern falls silent, save for the echoes of our labored breaths and the distant drip of water from the stalactites. I stand there, breathing heavily, my emotions a tumultuous storm. Yet there's a sense of closure, a finality that brings with it a bitter form of peace. Jura places a comforting hand on my shoulder, his touch grounding me in the present. He looks into my eyes, his own reflecting a deep understanding of loss and the resilience required to overcome it. Jura and I make our way back towards the survivors. The ochre handprints on the walls seem to guide us, their ancient glow a comforting presence in the dim light. As we approach the chamber where we had left the survivors, the sound of their anxious murmurs reaches our ears. The moment we step in, all eyes turn to us. Jura speaks to his people in a calm, steady voice, explaining what transpired. I watch as a collective sense of relief washes over them. We lead the survivors out of the cave, their faces reflecting a mix of exhaustion, relief, and lingering fear. Emerging from the cavern's mouth, we are greeted by the blinding light of day. The sun, high in the sky, bathes us in its warm glow, a welcome reprieve from the cold shadows of the cave. We set up a temporary camp near the cave entrance, using the remains of our supplies to provide some comfort. Jura, with his intimate knowledge of the land, gathers additional resources, ensuring that everyone is hydrated and fed. Then, in the late afternoon, a distant sound catches my attention. It's faint, barely audible over the wind, but unmistakable, the chop of helicopter blades. My heart leaps with hope. I shield my eyes with my hand, searching the sky. There on the horizon, a speck appears, growing larger as it approaches. It's a search and rescue helicopter, its rotors slicing through the air with a steady rhythm. Relief washes over me, a wave of emotions that's hard to contain. As the helicopter draws closer, its presence sends a wave of panic through the survivors. They huddle closer together, their eyes wide with fear. This modern machine, so alien to their isolated existence, seems to them like another monster, perhaps more terrifying than the one we've just defeated. "It's okay," I say softly, speaking more with my eyes than my words. "They're here to help." Jura, sensing their unease, speaks to them in his native tongue, his tone gentle yet firm. Realizing that the helicopter might not easily spot us amidst the rugged terrain, I rummage through my backpack for a signal mirror. Finding it, I step into a clearing, angling the mirror towards the sun. The reflection catches the light, sending a bright, flashing signal towards the helicopter. The helicopter banks slightly, its course adjusting as it homes in on our location. It hovers above us, the downdraft from its rotors sending dust swirling around our makeshift camp. In the days and weeks following the dramatic rescue, the world I knew and the world Jura and his people knew collided in a whirlwind of change, discovery, and inevitable challenges. The survivors, having lived in isolation, were suddenly thrust into a reality far removed from the only life they had known. The bright lights, the noise, the constant barrage of new faces and languages, it was overwhelming, to say the least. For Jura and his people, every aspect of modern life was a novel, often intimidating experience. The government and various cultural preservation organizations stepped in, offering support and resources to facilitate their integration. Researchers worked closely with Jura and his people to learn more about their culture and background. It was later discovered that this group belongs to a previously unknown Aboriginal clan, which called themselves the Kalani. Jura, who had shown such strength and resilience in the face of the Bunyip, now found himself in a position he could never have prepared for. Despite the overwhelming challenges, Jura faced this new world with the same bravery he had shown in the wilderness. He took charge, helping his people to navigate the complexities of this new life with a quiet dignity. I did everything in my power to bridge the gap between his world and ours. I worked with the support teams. I spent hours with Jura and the others, listening to their concerns, their fears, and their hopes. In the aftermath of the incident, Karajini National Park became the center of a highly clandestine operation. A task force from the Australian Defence Force was deployed, and the park was promptly locked down. Their mission was shrouded in secrecy, and the park remained off-limits to the public for an extended period. During this time, I was subjected to a series of extensive interviews. The authorities were particularly interested in every detail of my encounter with the Bunyip, how Jura and I managed to survive, and ultimately how we defeated it. I wasn't privy to the details of their operation or what they discovered in the depths of the park. There were whispers and rumors, of course, talk of strange findings, mysterious artifacts, and entities other than the Bunyip. But nothing was confirmed publicly. Eventually, the park was deemed safe, and the restrictions were lifted. Returning to my duties as a park ranger after the events that transpired is like stepping into a familiar painting that has had its colors subtly altered. There's an unspoken understanding among the rangers. We tread more carefully, speak more softly, and listen more intently to the whispers of the outback. There's a respect, a reverence almost, for what may still lie hidden in its depths. Hey everyone, it's Christian. I know you like park ranger stories, so here's another episode. Some of them are true, some are not.
It's on you to decide. So, sit back, grab a glass of bourbon, and enjoy the show.
The job offer came in a plain, unmarked envelope. I found it wedged under the door of my cabin in the Black Hills National Forest. Park rangers don't get much in the way of mysterious mail, usually just a paycheck and the occasional department memo. But this was different. Inside was a crisp, typewritten note on heavy paper that read, "Ranger Ross, your expertise in wilderness navigation and survival has been noted. If you're interested in a classified assignment with high stakes and higher pay, meet us at Deadwood Diner, 10 p.m. tonight. Come alone." The message wasn't signed, and it didn't include any other details. I stared at it for a long time, turning the paper over as if more information might appear. Classified assignment. Higher pay. It sounded like some sort of joke, but the wording was chillingly serious. I thought about tossing the note, chalking it up to a prank by one of the locals, but curiosity won out. After all, this wasn't your average tourist destination. The Black Hills had a reputation, not just for its beauty, but for the things people claimed to see deep in the woods. I arrived at the diner just before 10. The place was mostly empty, save for a waitress wiping down the counter and a lone man in a booth at the back. He was wearing a dark suit, his posture rigid, the way you'd expect from someone who didn't belong in a dusty roadside diner. I hesitated for a moment, then walked over. "You're Ranger Ross," he said without looking up. It wasn't a question. "Depends who's asking," I replied, sliding into the seat across from him. He finally looked at me, his face impassive but his eyes sharp. "Let's cut to the chase. I represent a branch of the government that doesn't officially exist. We deal with problems that don't make the news." "Problems?" I repeated, skeptical. "Creatures," he said simply, leaning in closer. "Things that aren't supposed to exist, but do. And they're becoming a problem we can't ignore." I blinked, unsure whether to laugh or get up and leave. But his expression didn't waver. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a file, sliding it across the table. "This is your chance to stop asking questions and start getting answers. We need people like you. Rangers who know the land, who can move unseen, and who won't run when they see something they don't understand." I opened the file. Inside were blurry photos, grainy images of shapes that looked almost human but were wrong. Elongated limbs, glowing eyes, unnaturally bent postures. My stomach churned as I flipped through them. There were also maps of the Black Hills, with certain areas marked in red. "Why me?" I asked, my voice quieter now. "Because you've spent years in these woods. You know them better than anyone. And because we need someone who can keep their mouth shut." He paused, letting the words sink in. "This isn't just about keeping people safe. It's about keeping this country safe." I looked back at the photos, my pulse quickening. I'd heard the stories, the whispers of strange things seen by hikers, the tracks that didn't match any known animal. I'd always dismissed them as folklore. But now, staring at the evidence, I wasn't so sure. "What happens if I say no?" I asked, meeting his gaze. The man smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You won't. Because once you've seen this," he gestured to the file, "you'll never be able to forget it." He was right. I didn't sleep that night. The images in the file were burned into my brain, and by morning, I'd made my decision. Whatever was out there, I needed to see it for myself. The briefing was held in an old warehouse on the outskirts of Rapid City, a far cry from the rustic beauty of the Black Hills. The man in the suit introduced himself only as Agent Keller and led me inside. The warehouse had been repurposed into a command center. A dozen people sat at rows of desks covered in monitors and charts, while others moved between them with an urgency that hinted at something big. Keller handed me a visitor badge and gestured for me to follow him. "You'll be assigned to a team already in the field. They're tracking a cluster of sightings near the Badlands. We need boots on the ground to confirm what we're dealing with." We stopped in front of a table where a young woman in tactical gear was examining a satellite map. She glanced up, her expression sharp but curious. "This is Ranger Ross," Keller said. "He's your new guide. Ross, this is Sergeant Monica Alvarez. She leads the field team." Alvarez gave me a once-over, her skepticism evident. "Another civilian? Great." "I'm not just a civilian," I said, trying not to bristle. "I've been in these woods longer than most of your team's been alive." She smirked. "We'll see if that experience counts when things get real." Before I could reply, Keller stepped between us, his voice firm. "We don't have time for introductions to drag out. Alvarez, brief him on the way. You leave in 10 minutes." The team's transport was a military-grade Humvee outfitted with more tech than I could name. Inside, Alvarez explained the mission. "Locals have reported strange activity near the Sheep Mountain table. Missing livestock, unnatural howls at night, and tracks no one can identify. One hiker claims to have seen something humanoid with glowing eyes, but he's been too rattled to give a clear account." "What do you think it is?" I asked, glancing at the map she had spread across her lap. She shrugged. "We don't think. We confirm. And then, if necessary, we neutralize." Her words were cold, clinical, and it was clear this wasn't her first hunt. The rest of the team, 2 men named Jackson and Carter, seemed equally hardened, their casual banter laced with a grim undercurrent. We reached the Badlands just before sunset. The landscape was stark and otherworldly, the jagged formations casting long shadows that stretched like claws across the ground. As we set up camp, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. "Tracks," Carter called out, kneeling near a dry creek bed. The prints were large, almost human, but with claws that dug deep into the cracked earth. They led away from the creek, disappearing into the rocky terrain. I knelt beside him, my stomach tightening. "These aren't from any animal I've ever seen. Too deep. Whatever made these was heavy, strong." Alvarez nodded. "Jackson, take point. Carter, cover the rear. Ross, you're with me." We followed the tracks into a narrow canyon as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air grew colder, and the silence was oppressive. Even the usual sounds of wildlife were absent, as if every living thing had fled the area. And then we heard it. A low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through the canyon walls. It wasn't like any sound I'd ever heard, a mix of primal rage and something almost intelligent. "Hold position," Alvarez barked, raising her weapon. The team formed a defensive circle, their flashlights cutting through the growing darkness. My hand instinctively went to the knife on my belt. I wasn't armed like the others, but I wasn't helpless either. The growl came again, closer this time, and I could feel the vibration in my chest. "What's out there?" I whispered, my breath visible in the cold air. Alvarez didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on the shadows ahead, her finger on the trigger. For the first time, I saw something in her expression that unsettled me. Fear. The growl turned into a roar, and the shadows seemed to shift, something massive moving just out of sight. Whatever we were tracking wasn't running anymore. It was hunting us. The roar echoed through the canyon, followed by a sound that sent a chill down my spine. Claws scraping against rock. Whatever was out there wasn't just massive, it was fast. Alvarez motioned for the team to move, her voice calm but commanding. "Fall back. Keep your flashlights on the perimeter." We scrambled up the rocky incline, the narrow canyon walls amplifying every sound. My pulse hammered in my ears as I followed Alvarez, clutching the knife at my side. Jackson was at the rear, his flashlight sweeping over the jagged rocks when he froze. "Contact, left flank," he shouted, his weapon snapping into position. The flashlight beam landed on a figure crouched low on the rocks. A creature that shouldn't exist. Its body was humanoid but grotesquely elongated, its limbs ending in sharp claws. The skin was a sickly gray, stretched taut over rippling muscles. Glowing eyes locked onto Jackson, and it let out a guttural snarl before leaping toward him. Jackson fired, the gunshots deafening in the confined space. The creature twisted in midair, faster than anything I'd ever seen, and disappeared into the shadows. Alvarez cursed under her breath. "Keep moving. We need higher ground." We scrambled up the canyon, the creature's growls echoing around us. It was playing with us, stalking just out of reach, testing our defenses. Carter stopped to cover the rear, his face pale but determined. "This thing's not scared of us," he muttered. "It's hurting us." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that we were still in control, but the words wouldn't come. Deep down, I knew he was right. We reached a plateau overlooking the canyon, the open space giving us a temporary reprieve. Alvarez barked orders, positioning the team in a defensive formation. Carter Jackson set up perimeter lights, Ross with me. She led me to the edge of the plateau, where we could see the canyon stretching out below. The moonlight cast eerie shadows over the rocks, but the creature was nowhere to be seen. Alvarez handed me a pair of binoculars. "Scan the area. It won't stay hidden for long." I raised the binoculars, my hands shaking as I scanned the jagged terrain. At first, I saw nothing but rocks and shadows. Then movement. A flash of gray against the black. The creature was perched on a boulder, its glowing eyes fixed on us. "It's watching us," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Alvarez didn't look surprised. "They always do." "They?" I turned to her, my stomach tightening. She hesitated, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "There's never just one. These things, they hunt in packs." Before I could process her words, the creature let out a piercing scream that reverberated through the canyon. From the shadows, more figures emerged. 2, 3, 4 of them, their glowing eyes cutting through the darkness. The team sprang into action, weapons aimed, but the creatures didn't attack. They circled the perimeter, their movements unnervingly coordinated, as if they were waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "We can't hold them off forever," Carter said, his voice strained. Alvarez nodded, her expression grim. "We don't need forever, just long enough for the extraction team to get here." "Extraction?" I asked, my chest tightening. She didn't answer. Instead, she raised her radio and spoke into it, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Eagle 1, this is Bravo team. We're pinned down at Grid 6A, multiple hostiles. Request immediate extraction." The creatures began to close in, their growls growing louder. I gripped my knife tighter, knowing it wouldn't be enough. As I stood there, surrounded by the impossible, I realized the truth. I wasn't hunting them. They were hunting me. The extraction didn't come fast enough. The creatures advanced with a terrifying blend of patience and precision, their glowing eyes locking onto each of us in turn. Alvarez barked orders, her voice steady even as the tension thickened. "Jackson, flare out. Light up the plateau. Carter, suppressive fire." Jackson fired a bright red flare into the sky, bathing the plateau in an eerie crimson glow. The creatures hesitated, their elongated bodies momentarily illuminated. Their skin looked wet, almost reflective, like something pulled from the depths of the ocean. "Open fire," Alvarez commanded. The air erupted with the sound of gunfire. Jackson and Carter unloaded their rifles into the creatures, but these weren't animals that fled from danger. The bullets hit their marks, but the beasts barely flinched. One let out a shriek, stumbling briefly, but the others closed ranks, their movements almost military in precision. "They're adapting," Alvarez hissed, reloading. "Ross, we need options. How do we slow them down?" I glanced around, my mind racing. The plateau was barren except for scattered boulders and the rocky incline we'd climbed. "Fire," I said finally. "They're moving through the shadows. We take that away, we force them into the open." Alvarez nodded sharply. "Carter Jackson, fuel canisters. Now." The team worked quickly, pouring fuel in a rough circle around our position while Alvarez and I kept watch. The creatures circled just beyond the flare's reach, their growls vibrating in my chest. Come on," I muttered as Carter lit a makeshift torch. He tossed it onto the fuel, and the flames roared to life, creating a barrier of light and heat. The creatures stopped, their glowing eyes narrowing as the fire crackled between us. For the first time, they seemed uncertain. "They don't like it," Carter said, his relief palpable. "Doesn't mean they'll stop," Alvarez replied, her voice cold. "Stay sharp." The radio crackled, and Keller's voice came through, distorted but clear enough. "Bravo team, this is Eagle One. Extraction inbound. Hold position." I felt a brief surge of hope, but it was short-lived. The largest of the creatures let out an ear-splitting scream, and the others began circling faster, testing the fire's perimeter. One lunged forward, claws swiping at Carter, who stumbled back with a shout. "They're testing us," Jackson yelled, firing another round. The largest creature suddenly leapt onto a boulder, standing fully upright. It was massive, easily 8 feet tall, its elongated arms ending in claws that gleamed in the firelight. It stared at me, and for a horrifying moment, I felt like it recognized me. Then it roared, and the others surged forward. "Hold them off," Alvarez shouted, firing into the massive bodies. The flames kept most at bay, but 2 of the creatures leapt through the fire, their charred skin hissing. Carter took one down with a close-range shot, but the other slammed into Jackson, pinning him to the ground. "Jackson!" Alvarez screamed, but there was no saving him. The creature tore into him with a savagery that made my stomach turn. "Extraction team better hurry," I muttered, gripping my knife as another creature lunged at me. I sidestepped, slashing at its side. The blade bit into its flesh, and the creature howled, retreating back into the shadows. The sound of rotor blades filled the air, and a helicopter appeared over the canyon, its spotlight cutting through the chaos. A rope ladder dropped, and Alvarez grabbed my arm. "Go, now." We scrambled for the ladder as the creatures closed in. Carter covered us, firing until his rifle clicked empty. Alvarez climbed up first, shouting for the pilot to hold steady. I reached the ladder just as one of the creatures grabbed my ankle. Its claws dug into my boot, pulling hard. I kicked at it desperately, my knife slashing at its arm. With a sickening crack, the creature's grip loosened, and I climbed higher, my chest burning with effort. Carter wasn't as lucky. He was halfway up the ladder when one of the creatures leapt, pulling him down with a shriek. Alvarez screamed his name, but there was nothing we could do. The helicopter lifted away, the creatures snarling and snapping below us. As we soared into the night sky, I looked down at the plateau. The flames were dying, and the creatures were already retreating into the shadows. Alvarez sat across from me, her face pale but composed. "You okay?" I nodded, though I wasn't sure it was true. My mind raced with images of what we'd just seen, and what we'd lost. "This isn't over," she said, her voice low. "Those things are still out there, and now they know we are too." The debriefing room was as sterile as a hospital operating theater, its walls a muted gray that seemed to swallow sound. I sat at the metal table, my hands trembling despite the cup of untouched coffee Alvarez had shoved into them. The helicopter ride back to the base had been eerily quiet, save for the occasional static-laced chatter on the pilot's radio. No one had spoken about what we'd just endured. Now, hours later, the weight of it all was sinking in. Carter was gone. Jackson was gone. And those creatures, those impossibilities, were still out there, prowling the South Dakota wilderness like living nightmares. Alvarez sat across from me, her jaw set in a way that warned me not to ask questions she wasn't ready to answer. A man I didn't recognize entered the room. A broad-shouldered figure in a dark suit, his face unreadable. He placed a thick folder on the table and sat down without a word. "Agent Hawthorne," Alvarez said, her voice clipped. Hawthorne nodded at her before turning his attention to me. "Ranger Ross, first off, let me say you performed admirably under extreme circumstances. Not many civilians could have handled what you saw out there. I wanted to snap back that I wasn't some clueless civilian, that I'd been thrust into this nightmare with no real preparation. But the exhaustion in my bones kept my mouth shut. What were those things?" I finally asked, my voice hoarse. I deserve to know. Hawthorne exchanged a glance with Alvarez before opening the folder. He slid a photograph across the table. It showed one of the creatures we'd encountered, its body crumpled and lifeless, black ichor pooling beneath it. We call them variants, Hawthorne said. They're not natural, and they're not local. Best we can tell, they were engineered. Engineered? I repeated, my stomach churning. You're saying someone made those things? Yes, Hawthorne said bluntly. And the South Dakota site is just one of many. These creatures, variants, were part of an experiment that went off the rails decades ago. We've been trying to contain them ever since. Alvarez leaned forward, her expression tight. Containment isn't working. They're adapting, getting smarter. We're losing ground. Hawthorne's face hardened. That's why we brought you in, Ranger. Your experience in the field, your ability to think on your feet. That's what we need. This wasn't a one-off operation. This was a test, and you passed. I stared at him, disbelief and anger warring within me. You used us as bait. Alvarez flinched, but Hawthorne didn't. Bait, reconnaissance, call it what you will. The fact is, we gained valuable intel tonight. Intel that might save lives down the line. I slammed my hands on the table, the coffee spilling across the metal surface. Carter and Jackson are dead because of your intel. How many more people are you willing to sacrifice? Hawthorne didn't blink. As many as it takes. The cold finality of his words left me speechless. I looked at Alvarez, hoping for some sign of humanity, but her expression was unreadable. Ross, she said quietly, this is bigger than any of us. You've seen what's out there. If we don't stop them, no one else will. I wanted to walk away, to leave this nightmare behind and pretend it had never happened. But the memory of those creatures, their glowing eyes, their impossible speed, was burned into my mind. What happens now? I asked, my voice hollow. Hawthorne leaned back, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Now, you join the team. Full access to resources, top-tier equipment. You'll be part of the fight. And if I say no? Hawthorne's smile vanished. Then you'll be debriefed, monitored, and sent on your way. But let me be clear, you won't be safe. No one is. Not as long as those things are out there. Alvarez finally spoke, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. Ross, we need people like you. People who can think under pressure, who can fight back. This isn't just about survival. It's about preventing the kind of catastrophe most people can't even imagine. The room fell silent, the weight of their words pressing down on me. I thought of Carter, of Jackson, of the people who had no idea what lurked in the shadows of their world. Finally, I nodded. I'm in. Hawthorne's smirk returned, but Alvarez looked almost relieved. Good, Hawthorne said, standing up. Welcome to the real fight. As they led me out of the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just signed my life away. But deep down, I knew there was no other choice. The world needed someone to stand between it and the monsters in the dark. The first mission as an official member of Alvarez's team was different. This time, I wasn't being kept in the dark. I sat in the cramped cabin of an unmarked cargo plane, flipping through a dossier Hawthorne had handed me an hour earlier. The new location was in the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, an area known for strange disappearances and sightings of creatures that defied explanation. The file detailed several cryptic reports, hikers vanishing without a trace, strange howls in the night, and mutilated wildlife found in unnatural patterns. Any of this familiar? I asked Alvarez, who was sitting across from me, checking her gear. She smirked faintly. Nothing's ever familiar. Every mission's a new nightmare. The rest of the team, 2 new faces, Davis and NG, remained quiet. Davis, a sharp-eyed tracker, was meticulously sharpening his knife, while NG, a tech specialist, tinkered with a drone. They were professionals, but I could sense the underlying tension in the air. Anything you're not telling me about this one? I pressed, looking up from the file. Alvarez met my gaze, her smirk fading. The locals call it the shadow stalker. Every description's different, but the one constant is its speed. Fast enough to take someone before they can scream. Fantastic, I muttered, closing the file. The plane jolted as it hit turbulence, and the intercom crackled to life. We're 5 minutes out. Prepare for drop. Drop? I asked, my stomach sinking. Alvarez grinned. You didn't think we'd just land, did you? Minutes later, we were standing at the open cargo door, the wind roaring around us. The forest stretched out below, a sea of black and green under the moonlight. Follow my lead, Alvarez shouted before leaping into the void. I hesitated for a split second before jumping after her. The air rushed past me, and the forest grew larger with every passing second. My parachute deployed with a sharp tug, and I steered toward the clearing where the others were landing. The moment my boots hit the ground, I unhooked the chute and drew my sidearm. The forest was eerily silent, the kind of quiet that pressed in on your ears. Alvarez was already on her feet, scanning the tree line. Davis, NG, secure the perimeter. Ross with me, she ordered. We moved cautiously through the underbrush, our flashlights cutting narrow paths through the darkness. The trees were massive, their trunks gnarled and ancient. Every sound, every rustle of leaves or snap of a branch, set my nerves on edge. What's the plan? I whispered. We locate the last known position of the missing hikers, Alvarez replied. NG's setting up surveillance, and Davis will lay down traps. Our job is recon. Get eyes on this thing and report back. And if it gets eyes on us first? Alvarez glanced at me, her expression grim. Then you shoot and pray it's enough. We came upon a small campsite, the remnants of a fire pit and scattered belongings telling a silent story of panic. A torn backpack lay in the dirt, its contents spilled out like a trail of breadcrumbs. Blood, Alvarez said, pointing to a dark stain on the ground. It led into the trees, disappearing into the shadows. Great, I muttered, gripping my weapon tighter. We followed the trail, the silence growing heavier with each step. The forest seemed to close in around us, the air thick and oppressive. My flashlight flickered, and I tapped it nervously. Keep moving, Alvarez said, her voice steady. The trail ended at the base of a massive tree, its roots twisting out of the ground like skeletal fingers. Something glinted in the beam of my flashlight. A silver necklace, partially buried in the dirt. Before I could comment, a low growl rumbled through the darkness. It wasn't like anything I'd ever heard. Deep, guttural, and filled with malice. Contact, Alvarez said, raising her weapon. The creature emerged from the shadows, its body a shifting mass of black fur and muscle. Its eyes glowed like embers, and its movements were unnaturally fluid, like smoke given form. Shadow stalker, Alvarez whispered. It lunged without warning, faster than I could react. Alvarez fired, the muzzle flash lighting up the forest, but the bullets seemed to pass through the creature like it wasn't fully there. Fall back, Alvarez shouted, but the creature was already upon us. I fired blindly, my shots doing little more than slowing it down. Alvarez threw a flashbang, and the explosion of light and sound sent the creature recoiling into the trees. We didn't wait to see if it would return. Alvarez grabbed my arm, and we ran, our breaths ragged as we crashed through the underbrush. When we reached the clearing, NG and Davis were waiting, their weapons drawn. What the hell was that? NG demanded. Something we're not ready for, Alvarez replied, her voice sharp. The roar of the approaching extraction helicopter was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. We scrambled aboard, the rotors kicking up a whirlwind of leaves as we lifted off. As the forest disappeared below us, I looked at Alvarez. This is what I signed up for, isn't it? She gave me a weary smile. Welcome to the team. I wasn't sure where else to post these stories, so I figured I'd share them here. I've been an SAR officer for a few years now, and along the way I've seen some things that I think you guys will be interested in. I have a pretty good track record for finding missing people, Most of the time they just wander off the path or slip down a small cliff, and they can't find their way back. The majority of them have heard the old stay where you are thing, and they don't wander far. But I've had 2 cases where that didn't happen. Both bother me a lot, and I use them as motivation to search even harder on the missing persons cases I get called on. The first was a little boy who was out berry picking with his parents. He and his sister were together, and both of them went missing around the same time. Their parents lost sight of them for a few seconds, and in that time both the kids apparently wandered off. When their parents couldn't find them, they called us, and we came out to search the area. We found the daughter pretty quickly, and when we asked where her brother was, she told us that he'd been taken away by the bear man. She said he gave her berries and told her to stay quiet, that he wanted to play with her brother for a while. The last she saw of her brother, he was riding on the shoulders of the bear man and seemed calm. Of course, our first thought was abduction, but we never found a trace of another human being in that area. The little girl was also insistent that he wasn't a normal man, but that he was tall and covered in hair like a bear, and that he had a weird face. We searched that area for weeks. It was one of the longest calls I've ever been on, but we never found a single trace of that kid. The other was a young woman who was out hiking with her mom and grandpa. According to the mother, her daughter had climbed up a tree to get a better view of the forest, and she'd never come back down. They waited at the base of the tree for hours, calling her name, before they called for help. Again, we searched everywhere, and we never found a trace of her. I have no idea where she could possibly have gone, because neither her mother or grandpa saw her come down. A few times, I've been out on my own searching with a canine, and they've tried to lead me straight up cliffs. Not hills, not even rock faces. Straight, sheer cliffs with no possible handholds. It's always baffling, and in those cases we usually find a person on the other side of the cliff, or miles away from where the canine has led us. I'm sure there's an explanation, but it's sort of strange. One particularly sad case involved the recovery of a body. A 9-year-old girl fell down an embankment and got on a dead tree at the base. It was a complete freak accident, but I'll never forget the sound her mother made when we told her what had happened. She saw the body bag being loaded into the ambulance, and she let out the most haunting, heartbroken wail I've ever heard. It was like her whole life was crashing down around her, and a part of her had died with her daughter. I heard from another SAR officer that she killed herself a few weeks after it happened. She couldn't live with the loss of her daughter. I was teamed up with another SAR officer because we'd received reports of bears in the area. We were looking for a guy who hadn't come home from a climbing trip when he was supposed to, and we ended up having to do some serious climbing to get to where we figured he'd be. We found him trapped in a small crevasse with a broken leg. It was not pleasant. He'd been there for almost 2 days, and his leg was very obviously infected. We were able to get him into a chopper, and I heard from one of the EMTs that the guy was absolutely inconsolable. He kept talking about how he'd been doing fine, and when he'd gotten to the top, a man had been there. He said the guy had no climbing equipment, and he was wearing a parka and ski pants. He walked up to the guy, and when the guy turned around, he said he had no face. It was just blank. He freaked out and ended up trying to get off the mountain too fast, which is why he'd fallen. He said he could hear the guy all night, climbing down the mountain and letting out these horrible muffled screams. That story bothered the hell out of me. I'm glad I wasn't there to hear it. One of the scariest things I've ever had happen to me involved the search for a young woman who'd gotten separated from her hiking group. We were out until late at night because the dogs had picked up her scent. When we found her, she was curled up under a large rotted log. She was missing her shoes and pack, and she was clearly in shock. She didn't have any injuries, and we were able to get her to walk with us back to base ops. Along the way, she kept looking behind us and asking us why that big man with black eyes was following us. We couldn't see anyone, so we just wrote it off as some weird symptom of shock. But the closer we got to base, the more agitated this woman got. She kept asking me to tell him to stop making faces at her. At one point, she stopped and turned around and started yelling into the forest, saying that she wanted him to leave her alone. She wasn't going to go with him, she said, and she wouldn't give us to him. We finally got her to keep moving, but we started hearing these weird noises coming from all around us. It was almost like coughing, but more rhythmic and deeper. It was almost insect-like. I don't really know how else to describe it. When we were within sight of base ops, the woman turns to me, and her eyes are about as wide as I can imagine a human could open them. She touches my shoulder and says, "He says to tell you to speed up. He doesn't like looking at the scar on your neck." I have a very small scar on the base of my neck, but it's mostly hidden under my collar, and I have no idea how this woman saw it. Right after she says it, I hear that weird coughing right in my ear, and I just about jumped out of my skin. I hustled her to ops, trying not to show how freaked out I was, but I have to say I was really happy when we left the area that night. This is the last one I'll tell, and it's probably the weirdest story I have. Now, I don't know if this is true in every SOR unit, but in mine, it's sort of an unspoken, regular thing we run into. You can try asking about it with other SAR officers, but even if they know what you're talking about, they probably won't say anything about it. We've been told not to talk about it by our superiors, and at this point we've all gotten so used to it that it doesn't even seem weird anymore. On just about every case where we're really far into the wilderness, I'm talking 30 or 40 miles, at some point we'll find a staircase in the middle of the woods. It's almost like if you took the stairs in your house, cut them out, and put them in the forest. I asked about it the first time I saw some, and the other officer just told me not to worry about it, that it was normal. Everyone I asked said the same thing. I wanted to go check them out, but I was told very emphatically that I should never go near any of them. I just sort of ignore them now when I run into them because it happens so frequently. I have a lot more stories, and I suppose if anyone's interested, I'll tell some of them tomorrow. If anyone has any theories about the stairs, or if you've seen them too, let me know. Part 2. So I logged back on tonight and was blown away by the staggering amount of interest this seems to have generated. First off, I'll address a few things that you guys have brought up. There's been an overwhelming amount of people mentioning the similarity between some of my stories and those of David Paulide's. I assure you I'm not trying to rip him off in any way. I've got nothing but respect for the guy. He's actually what inspired me to write this, because I can verify a lot of the things he talks about. We do have a lot of these strange missing persons cases, and most of the time they aren't solved. Either that, or we find them in places they have no business being. I personally haven't been on many calls like that, but I'll share a few that I've seen, and a story my friend told me that relates to this. There was a lot of feedback about the stairs, so I'll touch on that briefly here, and I'll also include a story. They come in a variety of shapes, sizes, styles, and conditions. Some are pretty dilapidated, just ruins, but others are brand new. I saw one set that looked like they came from a lighthouse. They were metal and spiral, almost old-fashioned. The stairs don't go up infinitely or farther than I can see, but some sets are taller than others. Like I said before, just imagine the stairs in your house as if someone cut and pasted them in the middle of nowhere. I don't have any pictures. It's never really occurred to me to try again after the first time, and I don't really feel like risking my job over it. I'll try again in the future, but I can't really promise anything. A few people expressed confusion about the guy who ran into the man with no face. Just to clarify, when the climber ascended and reached the top of this peak, he saw another man in a parka and ski pants. This was the man with no face. Sorry about the confusing wording of that story. I'll try to avoid that in the future. All right, on to the news stories. As far as missing persons go, I'd say about half the calls I get are related to that. The others are rescue calls, people who fall down cliffs and hurt themselves, get injured by fire. You wouldn't believe how often this happens, mostly drunk kids, get bitten or stung by animals or insects. We're a tight team, and we have veterans who are excellent at finding signs of lost people. That's what makes these cases where we never find any trace of them so frustrating. One in particular was upsetting for all of us because we did find a trace of them, but it just led to more questions than answers. An older man had been hiking alone on a well-established trail, but his wife called to say that he hadn't come home when he should have. Apparently, he had a history of seizures, and she was worried that he hadn't taken his medication and had suffered one out on the trail. Before you ask, I have no idea why he thought it was okay to go out alone, or why she didn't go with him. I don't ask about that kind of thing because past a certain point, it really doesn't matter. Someone is missing, and it's my job to find them. We went out in a standard search formation, and it wasn't long before one of our vets found signs that the guy had gone off the trail. We grouped up and followed him, spreading out in a fan to make sure we were covering as much ground as possible. Suddenly, a call comes over the radio telling us to all head back to the vet's location, and we come right away, because this usually means the missing person is injured, and we need a full team to help get them out safely. We meet back up, and the vet is just standing at the base of a tree with his hands on the sides of his head. I ask my buddy what's going on, and he points up into the branches of this tree. I almost couldn't believe what I was seeing, but there's a walking stick dangling from a branch at least 30 feet off the ground. The little strap thing on the handle has been looped around the branch, and it's just hanging there. There's no way the guy could have tossed it up that far, and we don't see any other signs that he's still in the area. We call up into the tree, but it's obvious no one's in it. We're all just sort of left scratching our heads. We keep searching for the guy, but we never find him. We even bring our canines out, but they lose his scent long before this tree. Eventually, the search is called off, because there are other calls we have to attend to, and past a certain point, there's not much we can do. The guy's wife called us every day for months, asking if we'd found her husband, and it was heartbreaking to hear her get more and more hopeless each time. I'm not sure why this call in particular was so upsetting, but I think it was just the sheer improbability of it. That and the questions that were raised. How the hell had this guy's cane ended up there? Did someone kill him and toss that up there as some weird trophy? We did our best to find him, but it was almost like a taunt. We still talk about that one from time to time. Missing kids are the most heartbreaking. Doesn't matter what circumstances they go missing under, it's never easy, and we always dread the ones we find deceased. It's not common, but it does happen. David Paulides talks a lot about kids SAR teams find in places they shouldn't be or couldn't be. I can honestly say I've heard about this kind of thing happening more than I've seen it, but I'll share one of the ones that I think about a lot that I witnessed personally. A mother and her 3 kids were out for a picnic in an area of the park that has a small lake. One is 6, one is 5, and the other is about 3. She's watching them all really closely, and according to her, she never lets them out of her sight at any time. She never saw anyone else in the area either, which is important. She packs their stuff up, and they start to head back to the parking area. Now, this lake is only about 2 miles into the woods, and it's on a very clearly established trail. It's almost impossible to get lost getting from the parking area to it, unless you're deliberately going off the path like an imbecile. Her kids are walking in front of her when she hears what sounds like someone coming up the path behind her. She turns around, and in the 4 or so seconds she's not looking, her 5-year-old son vanishes. She figures he stepped off the trail to pee or something, and she asks her other 2 where he went. They both tell her that a big man with a scary face came out of the woods next to them, took the kid's hand, and led him into the trees. The 2 remaining kids don't seem upset. In fact, she says later that it seems like they've been drugged. They're sort of spacey and fuzzy, so of course she freaks out, starts looking frantically in the area for her kid. She's screaming his name, and she says at one point she thinks she heard him answer her. Now, obviously, she can't go blindly running into the woods. She's got the other 2 kids, so she calls the police and they send us out immediately. We respond, and we start the search for him. Over the course of this search, which spans miles, we never find a single trace of the kid. Canines can't pick up any scent, We don't find any clothing or broken bushes or literally anything that would signify a child being there. Of course, there's suspicion about the mother for a while, but it's pretty clear that she's completely destroyed by the whole thing. We looked for this kid for weeks with a lot of volunteer help, but eventually the search peters out and we have to move on. The volunteers keep searching though, and one day we get a call on the radio letting us know that a body has been found and needs to be recovered. They tell us the location, and none of us can believe it. We figure it has to be a different kid. But we go out there, about 15 miles from the site where he vanished, and sure enough, we find the body of the kid we've been looking for. I have been trying to figure out how this kid got where he did ever since we found him, and I've never come up with an answer. A volunteer just happened to be in the area because he figured he might as well look in places no one else would think to on the off chance the body had been dumped. He comes to the base of a tall, rocky slope, and halfway up, he sees something. He looks through his binoculars and sure enough, it's the body of a little boy, stuffed in a little opening in the rock. He recognizes the color of the kid's shirt, so he knows right away that it's the missing boy. That's when he calls it in and we're dispatched. It took us almost an hour to get his body down, and none of us could believe what we were seeing. Not only was this kid 15 miles from where he'd started, there was no possible way he could have gotten up there on his own. This slope is treacherous, and it's hard even for us with our climbing gear. A 5-year-old boy had no way of getting up there, of that I'm certain. Not only that, but the kid doesn't have a scratch on him. His shoes are gone, but his feet aren't damaged or dirty. So it wasn't as if an animal dragged him up there. And from what we can tell, he hasn't been dead that long. He'd been out there over a month by that point, and it looked like he'd only been dead for, at most, a day or two. The whole thing was unbelievably strange, and was one of the most disconcerting calls I've ever been on. We found out later that the coroner determined the kid had died from exposure. He'd frozen to death, probably late at night 2 days before we found him. There were no suspects and no answers. To date, it's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. One of my first jobs as a trainee was a search op for a 4-year-old kid that had gotten separated from his mom. This was one of those cases where we knew we were going to find him because the dogs were on a strong scent trail, and we saw clear signs that he was in the area. We ended up finding him in a berry patch about half a mile from where he'd been last seen. Kid wasn't even aware that he'd wandered that far. One of the vets brought him back, which I was glad for because I'm really not good with kids, and I find it hard to talk to them and keep them company. As my trainer and I are headed back, she decides to take me on a detour to show me one of the hot spots where we tend to find missing people. It's a natural dip in the land near a popular trail, and people will usually move downhill because it's easier. We hike out there, it's a few miles away, and we get there in about an hour or so. As we're walking around the area and she's pointing out places she's found people in the past, I see something in the distance. Now, this area we're in is about 8 miles from the main parking area, though there's back roads you can take to get closer if you don't want to hike that far. But we're on state-protected land, which means there can't be any kind of commercial or residential development out here. The most you'll ever see is a fire tower or makeshift shelter that homeless people think they can get away with building. But I can see from here that whatever this thing is has straight edges, and if there's one thing you learn quickly, it's that nature rarely makes straight lines. I point it out, but she doesn't say anything. She just hangs back and lets me wander over and check it out. I get within about 20 feet of it, and all the hair on the back of my neck stands up. It's a staircase, in the middle of the woods. In the proper context, it would literally be the most benign thing ever. It's just a normal staircase with beige carpet and about 10 steps tall. But instead of being in a house, where it obviously should be, it's out here in the middle of the woods. The sides aren't carpeted, obviously, and I can see the wood it's made of. It's almost like a video game glitch, where the house has failed to load completely and the stairs are the only thing visible. I stand there, and it's like my brain is working overtime to try and make sense of what I'm seeing. My trainer comes and stands next to me, and she just stands there casually, looking at it as if it's the least interesting thing in the world. I ask her what the F this thing is doing here, and she just chuckles. Get used to it, rookie. You're gonna see a lot of them. I start to move closer, but she grabs my arm. Hard. I wouldn't do that, she says. Her voice is casual, but her grip is tight, and I just stand there looking at her. You're gonna see them all the time, but don't go near them. Don't touch them, don't go up them. Just ignore them. I start to ask her about it, but something in the way she's looking at me tells me that it's best if I don't. We end up moving on, and the subject doesn't come up again for the rest of my training. She was right though. I'd say about every fifth call I go on, I end up running across a set of stairs. Sometimes they're relatively close to the path, maybe within 2 or 3 miles. Sometimes they're 20, 30 miles out, literally in the middle of nowhere, and I only find them during the broadest searches or training weekends. They're usually in good condition, but sometimes it looks like they've been out there for miles. All different kinds, all different sizes. The biggest I ever saw looked like they came out of a turn-of-the-century mansion, and were at least 10 feet wide, with steps leading up at least 15 or 20 feet. I've tried talking about it with people, but they just give me the same response my trainer did. It's normal. Don't worry about it, they're not a big deal, but don't go close to them or up them. When trainees ask me about it now, I give them the same response. I don't really know what else to tell them. I'm really hoping someday I get a better answer, but it hasn't happened yet. This is another one that was less spooky and more sad. A young man went missing late in winter, when realistically no one should be going that far out onto the trails. We close a lot of them, but some remain open year-round, unless there's a shitload of snow. We did an op for him, but we had about 6 feet of snow on the ground. It was an unusually heavy snow year, and we knew it wasn't likely that we'd find him until spring when the thaw came. Sure enough, when the first big thaw came, a hiker reported a body a little ways off the main trail. We found him at the base of a tree, in a pile of melted snow. I knew right away what had happened, and it scared the living shit out of me. Most of you who ski or snowboard, or spend any amount of time on a mountain, will probably have guessed too. When snow falls, it doesn't collect as thick in the areas beneath the branches. It happens most with fir trees because they have a sort of closed umbrella shape. So what you end up with is a space around the base of a tree that's filled with a mixture of loose, powdery snow, air, and branches. They're called tree wells, and they're not immediately obvious if you don't know what you're looking for. We put up signs in the welcome center, big ones, letting people know how dangerous they are. But every year that we get an unusual amount of snow, at least one person doesn't read them, or doesn't take the warning seriously, and we find out about it in spring. My best guess is that this young man was hiking and got tired, or maybe a cramp from walking in the deep snow. He went to go sit at the base of the tree, not knowing that there was a tree well, and fell in. He got stuck with his feet up, and the surrounding snow caved in around him. Unable to free himself, he suffocated. It's called snow immersion suffocation, and it doesn't usually happen except in really deep snow. But if you get stuck in a weird position like this guy did, even 6 feet of snow can be lethal. What scared me the most was imagining how he must have struggled. Upside down in the freezing cold, he didn't die quickly. The snow would have formed a dense, heavy pile on top of him, and it would have been literally impossible to get out. As it got harder to breathe, he would have known what was happening. I can't even imagine what he was thinking in his last moments. A lot of my less outdoorsy friends want to know if I've ever seen the goatman while I've been out on calls. Unfortunately, or I guess fortunately, I've never had anything quite like that happen. I guess the closest was the whole black-eyed man thing, but I didn't see anything. However, there was one call where I had something kind of similar happen, but I'm not sure I'm willing to chalk it up to the goatman. We'd gotten a report that an older woman had fainted along one of the trails and needed assistance getting back down to the main area. We hike up to where she's at, and her husband is just beside himself. He runs, well, I guess more jogs to us, and tells us that he was a little ways off the trail looking at something when his wife starts screaming behind him. He runs back to her and she's passed out on the trail. We get her on a backboard, and as we're getting her down to the welcome center, she comes to and starts screaming again. I calm her down and ask her what happened. I can't remember verbatim what she said, but essentially what happened was this. She'd been waiting for her husband when she started hearing this really strange sound. She said it sounded sort of like a cat, but it was off somehow, and she couldn't quite figure out why. She went a little ahead to try and hear it better, and it sounded like it was coming closer. She said the closer it got, the more uneasy she was, until she finally figured out what was wrong. I do remember this next part, because it was so weird that I don't think I could forget it if I tried. It wasn't a cat. It was a man saying the word meow over and over. Just meow, meow, meow. But it wasn't a man, it couldn't have been, because I've never heard a man make his voice buzz like that. I thought my hearing aid was going out, but it wasn't. I adjusted it, and it still sounded all buzzy. It was awful. He was coming closer, but I couldn't see him. And the closer he got, the more scared I was, and the last thing I remember was a shape coming out of the trees. I guess that's when I fainted. Now, obviously, I'm a little perplexed as to why a guy would be out in the woods chanting meow, meow at people. So once we get down the mountain, I tell my superior that I'm going to go search the area to see if I can find anything. He gives me the go-ahead, and I grab a radio and hike back to where she fainted. I don't see anyone, so I keep going about a mile more, and when I head back, I go off the trail to see if I can figure out where she saw him coming from. It's almost sunset by this point, and I don't have any desire to be out at night alone, so I just sort of write it off and make a mental note to check it out again tomorrow. But as I'm headed back, I start to hear something in the distance. I stop, and I call out for anyone in the immediate area to identify themselves. The sound didn't come closer or get louder, but it sounded exactly like a man saying meow, meow in this really odd monotone. As comical as it makes it sound, it was almost like that guy on South Park with the electrolarynx, Ned. I go off the trail in the direction I think it's coming from, but I never seem to get closer. It's almost like it's coming from all directions. Eventually, it just sort of fades out, and I ended up going back to the welcome center. I didn't get any further reports like that, and even though I went back to that area, I never heard that exact sound again. I suppose it could have been some stupid kid out there messing with people, but even I have to admit it was weird. So this kind of turned into a massive wall of text, and for that I apologize. I wanted to get to the stories my friend told me, and he does have some good ones, so I'll post those tomorrow evening. I also have a few more of my own I think you guys will like. I'm sorry to keep you all in suspense again. Hopefully the stories here make up for it and help you get through the next 24 hours until I can post again. Edit. Since it seems like all of you would like to hear more, tomorrow I'll write up as many stories as I can and do a massive post. I'll include my friend's stories, and I'll see if I can't get a hold of a few more people who might have interesting things to talk about. I just wasn't sure how people felt about big, huge walls of text, but if you're all okay with it, I'll post lots of stories. Part 3. Well, once again, you guys have blown me away with your staggering amount of responses to my stories. There's no way I can respond to each of you individually, so I'm just going to address some common things again, and then move on to the stories. I'm going to write as many as I can think of, in addition to my friend's stories, and I will probably not update again until I get a chance to answer some questions that I myself have for my superiors. Alright, so the common questions I found you all had. I am not comfortable talking about where exactly I work, unfortunately. In all reality, some of the things I've mentioned here could get me in a lot of trouble or fired, so it's best if I just don't discuss too much. I will say that I'm in the United States, and in an area that is comprised of a great deal of wilderness. We're talking hundreds of miles of thick forest, with a mountain range and a few lakes. There is still a great amount of interest in the stairs, and luckily for you guys, my friend has a story that I think you'll all be very interested in. I'll go into that more at the end of this update. As for whether or not I have ever thought of asking my superiors about them, I have, but again, I don't want to risk my job. However, one of my former superiors no longer works as an SAR officer, and it's possible that he may be willing to talk to me about it. I'll be speaking to him later in the week, and I will let you all know what comes of that. As far as advice on becoming an SAR officer goes, I think the best advice I can give is to contact your local Forest Service office and see if they offer training courses or what the qualifications are. I've been doing this for years, and I started out as a volunteer helping on SAR operations. It's a great job, despite the occasional tragic situations, and I wouldn't want to do anything else. All right, let's move on to the stories. The first happened on a case that I went out on right after I got out of training, and was still pretty new to everything. Before I took this job, I was a volunteer, so I had a basic idea of what to expect. But on those calls, you're mostly dealing with finding lost people after vets have found signs of them. As an SAR officer, you go out for all kinds of cases, from animal bites to heart attacks. This case got called in early in the morning from a young couple who were up on one of the trails that goes by the lake. The husband was completely hysterical, and we couldn't really figure out what was going on. We could hear the woman screaming in the background, and he was begging us to come up there right away. When we get there, we see him holding his wife, and she's got something in her arms. She's screaming these awful, almost animal-like screams, and he's sobbing. He sees us and he screams at us to help them, to please get an ambulance up there. Now, obviously, we can't just drive an ambulance up the walking path, so we ask him if his wife needs help, or if she can walk on her own. He's still hysterical, but he manages to tell us that it's not his wife that needs help. I go over while one of the vets tries to calm him down, and I ask the wife what's going on. She's rocking, holding something, and just shrieking over and over. I crouch down and see that whatever she's holding, it's covering her with blood. That's when I notice the sling on her front, and my heart sinks. I ask her to tell me what's going on, and I sort of pry her arms gently open so I can see what she's holding. It's her baby, obviously dead. His head is caved in on one side, and he's covered in scratches. Now, I've seen dead bodies before, but something about this whole situation hits me hard. I have to take a second to compose myself, and I get up and go get one of the other vets, who's standing by. I tell him that it's a dead kid, and he sort of pats my shoulder and tells me he'll deal with it. It took us over an hour to get this woman to let us see her kid. Every time we try to take him from her, she flips out and tells us we can't have him, that he'll be okay if we just leave her alone and let her help him. But eventually, one of the vets manages to calm her down, and she gives us the body. We took it back to the med area, but when the EMTs showed up, they told us that there was never any hope of saving the kid. He died instantly from the trauma to his head. I was good buddies with one of the nurses who met them at the hospital, and she told me later what had happened. Turns out the couple had been walking with the baby in the sling, and they stopped because the kid was fussing. The dad takes the kid and is holding him, looking out over this little gully by the path. The mom comes to stand next to him, but she ends up stepping on a loose patch of soil, and she trips. She falls into the dad, who drops the kid, who ends up falling about 20 feet down this little gully onto the rocks at the bottom. The dad climbed down and recovered the kid, but he'd fallen right on his head and was dead by the time he got there. The baby was only about 15 months old. It was a total freak accident, a series of events that coalesced into the worst possible outcome. Probably one of the more awful calls I've been on. I haven't seen a lot of animal bites in my time as an SAR officer, mostly because there aren't that many animals that come around the area. While there are bears in the area, they tend to stay pretty far away from people, and sightings are highly unusual. Most of the animals you'll see are small ones like coyotes, raccoons, or skunks. What we do see frequently, though, are moose. And let me tell you, moose are nasty creatures. They'll chase after anything for any reason, and God help you if you get in between a female and its baby. One of the more amusing calls was of a guy who'd gotten chased down by an absolutely massive male moose and was stuck up a tree. Took us almost an hour to get him down, and when he was finally on solid ground again, he looks at me and says, "God damn, them things is big up close." I guess that's not really a scary story, but we still laugh about that one. I honestly don't know how I'd forgotten this story, but it is by far the scariest thing that's happened to me. I guess maybe I've tried so long to forget about it that it just didn't come to mind right away. As someone who spends literally all of their time in the woods, you don't ever want to let yourself get scared of being alone or out in the middle of nowhere. That's why when you have experiences like this, you tend to just forget about them and move on. This is, to date, the only thing that's ever made me really seriously consider if this job is the right one for me. I don't really like talking about it much, but I'll do the best I can to remember it all. As I recall, this took place right at the end of spring. It was a typical lost child call. A 4-year-old girl had wandered away from her family's campsite and had been missing for about 2 hours. Her parents were completely despondent and told us what most parents do. "My kid would never wander away. She's so good about staying close. She's never done anything like this before." We assure the parents that we'll do everything we can to find her, and we spread out in a standard search formation. I was partnered with one of my good buddies, and we were sort of casually holding conversation while we hiked. I know it sounds callous, but you do sort of become desensitized when you've done this long enough. It becomes the norm, and I think to a certain extent you have to learn to desensitize yourself in order to work this job. We search for a good 2 hours, going well beyond where we think she'd be, and we come out of a small valley when something makes us both stop in unison. We freeze and look at each other, and there's almost a sensation like a plane depressurizing. My ears pop, and I have this odd sensation of having dropped about 10 feet. I start to ask my buddy if he felt that, but before I can, we hear the loudest sound I've ever heard in my life. It's almost like a freight train passing directly by us, but it's coming from every direction at once, including above and below us. He screams something to me, but I can't hear him over this deafening roar. Understandably freaked out, we look all around us, trying to find the source of the sound, but neither of us sees anything. Of course, my first thought is a landslide, but we're not near any cliffs, and even if we were, it would have hit us by now. The sound goes on, and we're trying to yell to each other, but even standing close together, we can't hear anything but this sound. Then, as suddenly as it starts, it stops, like someone threw a switch and cut it off. We stand there for a second, perfectly still, and slowly the normal sounds of the woods come back. He asks me what the F just happened, but I just kind of shrug, and we stand there looking at each other for a minute. I get on the radio and ask if anyone else just heard the end of the world, but no one else hears it, even though we're all within shouting distance of each other. My buddy and I just sort of shrug it off and keep going. About an hour later, we all check up on the radios, and no one's found the little girl. Most of the time, we won't search when it gets dark, but because we don't have any kind of lead on her, a few of us decide to keep going, including me and my buddy. We keep close together, and we're calling out for her every couple of minutes. At this point, I'm hoping beyond hope that we find her, because while I may not like kids, the idea of them being out all alone in the dark is awful. The woods can be intimidating to kids in the daylight. At night, well, it's a whole different beast. But we're not seeing any signs of her or getting any responses, and around midnight, we decide to turn around and head back to the rendezvous point. We're about halfway back when my buddy stops and shines his light to the right of us, into a really thick deadfall or group of dead trees. I ask him if he's heard a response, but he just tells me to be quiet a second and listen. I do, and in the distance, I can hear what sounds like a kid crying. We both call the girl's name and listen for any kind of response, but it's just this really faint crying. We head in the direction of this deadfall and go around it, calling her name over and over. As we get closer to the crying, I start getting this weird feeling in my gut, and I tell my buddy that something isn't right. He tells me he feels the same way, but we can't figure out what it is. We stop where we are and call the girl's name again, and at the same time, we both figure it out. The crying is on a loop. It's the same little hitching sob, then wail, then quiet hiccup, repeated over and over. It's exactly the same every time, and without saying another word, we both take off running. It's the only time I've ever lost my composure like that, but something about it was so incredibly wrong, and neither of us wanted to stay out there anymore. When we got back to the rendezvous, we asked if anyone else had heard anything strange, but no one else knew what we were talking about. I know it sounds sort of anticlimactic, but that called me up for a long time. As for the little girl, we never found a trace of her. We keep an eye out for her and all the other people who we've never found, but frankly, I doubt we'll ever find anything. Of the missing persons calls I've gone out on, only a handful have ever resulted in a complete disappearance, meaning no trace of the person and no body ever found. But sometimes finding a body just leads to more questions than answers. Here are some of the bodies we found that have become infamous in our team. A teenage boy whose remains were recovered almost a year after he vanished. We found the top of his skull, 2 finger bones, and his camera almost 40 miles from where he was last seen. The camera, sadly, was destroyed. The pelvis of an older man who had vanished a month earlier. That was all we found. The lower jaw and right foot of a 2-year-old boy on the highest peak of a ridge in the southern part of the park. The body of a 10-year-old girl with Down syndrome, almost 20 miles from where she'd vanished. She had died of exposure 3 weeks after going missing, and all of her clothes were intact except for her shoes and jacket. There were berries and cooked meat in her stomach when they did the autopsy. The coroner said it appeared as if someone had been taking care of her. There were no suspects ever identified. The frozen body of a 1-year-old baby, found a week after vanishing in the hollow trunk of a tree 10 miles from the area he was seen last. There was fresh milk found in his stomach, but his tongue was gone. A single vertebra and right kneecap of a 3-year-old girl, found in the snow almost 20 miles from the campground her family had been at the previous summer. Now on to a couple of the stories my friend told me. I mentioned that you were all interested in the stairs, and you're in luck. He's had a closer encounter with them. Though he doesn't have any explanation for them, he does have a bit more experience with them than I do. My buddy has been an SAR officer for about 7 years. He started when he was a junior in college, and he had a very similar experience when he first encountered the stairs. His trainer told him almost the same thing mine did, which was to never go near, touch, or ascend them. For the first year, he did just that, but apparently his curiosity got the better of him, and on one call he broke away from the line and went to go check a set of them out. He said they were about 10 miles from the path where a teenage girl had vanished, and the dogs were following a scent. He was on his own, lagging behind the main group, when he saw a set of stairs off to his left. They looked like they were from a new house because the carpeting was pristine and white. He said that as he got closer, he didn't feel any different or hear any weird noises. He was expecting something to happen, like bleeding from his ears or collapsing, but he got right up next to them and didn't feel anything. The only thing he said that was odd was that there was absolutely no debris on the steps. No dirt, leaves, dust, anything. And there didn't appear to be any signs of animal or insect activity in the immediate area, which he found strange. It was less like things were avoiding them, and more like they just happened to be in a relatively barren part of the forest. He touched the stairs and didn't feel anything except that sort of sticky feeling you get from new carpet. Making sure his radio was on, he slowly climbed the stairs. He said it was terrifying because the way they'd been stigmatized, he wasn't really sure what was going to happen to him. He joked that half of him expected to be teleported to some other dimension, and the other half was watching for a UFO to come swooping down. But he got to the top with little event, and he stood there looking around. But he said the longer he stood on the top step, the more he felt like he was doing something very, very wrong. He described it as the feeling you'd get if you were in a part of a government building you have no business being in. As if someone was going to come and arrest you, or shoot you in the back of the head at any second. He tried to brush it off, But the feeling got stronger and stronger, and that's when he realized that he couldn't hear anything anymore. The sounds of the forest were gone, and he couldn't hear his own breathing. It was like some kind of weird, awful tinnitus, but more oppressive. He climbed back down and rejoined the search, and didn't mention what he'd done. But he said the weirdest part came after. His trainer was waiting back at the welcome center after the search ended for the day, and he cornered my buddy before he could leave. He said his trainer had this look of intense anger, and he asked what was wrong. "You went up them, didn't you?" My buddy said it wasn't phrased as a question. He asked how his trainer knew. The trainer just shook his head. "Because we didn't find her. The dogs lost her scent." My buddy asked what that had to do with anything. The trainer asked how long he'd been on the stairs, and my buddy said no more than a minute. The trainer gave him this really awful, almost dead-eyed look, and told him that if he ever went up another set of stairs again, he'd be fired. Immediately, the trainer walked away, and I guess he's never answered any of the questions my buddy has asked him about it since. My buddy has been involved in a lot of missing persons cases where there's never been a trace of them found. I mentioned David Paulides, and my buddy said he can confirm that those stories are, for the most part, accurate. He said that most of the time, if the person isn't found right away, they're either never found, or they're found weeks, months, or years later, in places they can't possibly have gotten to. One story he told me really stood out that involved a 5-year-old boy with a severe mental disability. The little boy vanished from a picnic area in the late fall. In addition to the mental disability, he was also physically handicapped, and his parents explained over and over that he simply could not have vanished. It was impossible. Someone had to have taken him. My buddy said they searched for this kid for weeks, going miles out of the accepted range, but it was like he'd never been there. The dogs couldn't pick up his scent anywhere, not even in the picnic area where he'd apparently vanished from. Suspicion fell on the parents, but it was pretty clear that they were devastated and hadn't done anything sinister to their kid. The search was concluded about a month later, and my buddy said everyone had pretty much forgotten it by later in the winter. He was out on a training op in the snow on one of the higher peaks when he came across something in the snow. He said he saw it from far away at first, and when he got closer, he realized it was a shirt, frozen and sticking part way out of the powder. He recognized it as belonging to the kid because it had a distinctive pattern. About 20 yards away, he found the kid's body, laying partially buried in the snow. My buddy said there was no way the kid had been dead for any more than a few days, even though he'd been missing for almost 3 months. The kid was curled around something, and when my buddy brushed off the snow to see what it was, he said he almost couldn't believe what he was seeing. It was a big chunk of ice that had been carved crudely to look sort of like a person. The kid was holding it so tight that it had frostbitten his chest and hands, which my buddy could tell even with the decay that had taken place. He radioed the rest of the crew, and they took the body off the mountain. Now he recapped all of this for me, and to put it simply, there was no way this kid could have both survived for almost 3 months on his own, or have gotten to this peak. There was no physical way this child could have walked almost 50 miles and ended up on the top of a goddamn mountain. To top it off, there was nothing in the kid's stomach or colon. Nothing, not even water. It was like my buddy said, the kid had been taken off the face of the earth, put in suspended animation, and dropped on this mountain months later, only to die of exposure. He's never really gotten over that one. The last story I'll share from him was one that took place relatively recently, only a few months ago. They were out doing a recon for mountain lions because there had been several reports of sightings in the last couple of days. One of our jobs is to scout out the areas where these animals are seen to ensure that if they are in the area, we can warn people and close off those trails. He was out on his own in a very heavily forested part of the park toward dusk when he heard what sounded like a woman screaming in the distance. Now, as most of you know, when a mountain lion screams, it sounds almost exactly like a woman being brutally murdered. It's unsettling, but far from abnormal. My buddy radioed back and let ops know that he'd heard one, and that he was going to keep going to see if he could figure out where its territory started. He heard the mountain lion scream a couple more times, always from the same spot, and determined the approximate area of the mountain lion's territory. He was about to head back when he heard another scream, this time within only a few yards of him. Of course, he freaks out and starts heading back at a much faster pace, because the last thing he wants is to run into a goddamn mountain lion and get mauled to death. As he got back on the path and started heading back, the screaming followed him, and he broke into a jog. When he was about a mile from Ops, the screaming stopped, and he turned around to see if it was following him. It was almost night by this point, but he said in the distance, just before the path rounded a corner, he could see what looked like a male figure. He called out to them, warning them that the paths were closed and that he needed to come back to the welcome center. The figure just stood there, and my buddy started to walk over. When he was about 10 yards away, the figure took, as he described, an impossibly long step toward him and let out the same scream my buddy had been hearing. My buddy didn't even say anything. He just turned and sprinted back to Ops, never looking behind him. By the time he got back, the screaming had moved back into the woods. He didn't mention it to anyone else, just said that there was a mountain lion in the area and that they would need to close those paths until the animal could be located and moved. I'm going to end this entry here since it's turned into a huge wall of text. I'm going to be heading out on a yearly training op tomorrow morning, so I'll be gone until early next week. I'll be meeting with a lot of former trainers and buddies who work in other areas of the park, and I'll be asking around about any stories they'd like to share. I'm so glad you guys have been interested in my stories, and once I'm back from this op, I'll continue to share them. To be continued.